You're listening to Braves Country Baseball's Salute to Service Special, a compilation from our Armchair Quarterback radio show, which aired for 8 years on CBS Sports affiliates before changing to Braves Country. It's a compilation of shows that are going over some of our more famous athletes who served our country as well. And thank you for your service. Hope y'all enjoy from Armchair Quarterbacks Radio Days Gone By.
Armchair.
10 years ago, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit. These men promptly escaped from maximum security stockade. Today, still wanted by the government, they survive as soldiers of fortune. If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire
Braves Country.
'Cause he's the armchair quarterback. He's full of beer and he's full of snacks. The all-American man.
Yeah, man. I did a little research, and of course there were several of them that popped to mind automatically. Pat Tillman, no doubt, Army Ranger. Gave up a promising NFL career to serve his country. But that was to me, that was the first one that popped in my head, and so I wanted to do a little research, man, and I had a couple of them. Jackie Robinson, Bradley served in the United States Army. Yogi Berra served in the U.S. Navy.
Yogi Berra lived a life, didn't he?
He did. And then, and this one's for Teamus, man. Ted Williams.
Yeah.
He didn't just serve in World War II. He also served in Korea. Gave up right around 5 years of his Major League Baseball career to serve his country.
The other thing about him is this, that I don't think a lot of people realize, is that, first of all, his records would have been probably darn near unbeatable if he would have played those 5 years if there wasn't wartime, right? But then the other thing is he grew up in military town. He grew up in San Diego, so that's why it meant a lot to him to go join the Navy, because obviously San Diego, outside of Jacksonville and maybe Annapolis, San Diego is the U.S. Navy. And the other thing about him that I think usually gets lost in the mix is that not only is he arguably the greatest hitter of all time, most people consider him the greatest pilot of all time. His eyesight and reflexes just must have been off the charts when you consider he's up there as one of the greatest Navy pilots ever and one of the greatest hitters ever. And to me, that's what resonates, is the guy just had an unbelievable talent. They should have been cloning him. I know they tried to, and they did that weird thing. They froze his head or whatever. I don't know what that was about, but if they could have cloned folks back then, I mean, that's the guy you clone. Whether you're a Red Sox fan or not, man, I don't see anyone that has ever said anything bad about Ted Williams. I just think one of the coolest things about him is that they asked him as a young child, what did he want to be when he grew up? And he said, I want to be the guy that walks down the street and people point at him and say, that's the best damn hitter that's ever walked the earth. And he did it. I mean, to be that laser focused on something that early in his career.
Yeah, laser focused, man. I mean, and everybody knows I'm no Red Sox fan, but I have a great deal of respect for his ability on the baseball field and for his service to our.
Well, it's not his fault that he got picked by the wrong team, right?
Yeah, it's totally not his fault, man.
It's not like the Red Sox are a college and he chose to go there.
Exactly.
I've got my Mount Rushmore that I'm going to get into next hour, but some of the people that I think a lot of people don't know a lot about, I'm going to gloss them over real quickly. We've got other things we're going to get into, and we're going to be doing this all day long. You remember Leon Spinks? That he's the only fighter ever to take the belt away from Ali. Okay? What a lot of people don't know about that guy is that he grew up in a rough area in St. Louis, Missouri. He joined the Marine Corps to get the heck out of there. When he got in the Marine Corps, they taught him how to box. I thought that was pretty. His service wasn't jaw-dropping like Ted Williams, but I thought that was some of the cool stuff. And one of the guys that is probably forgotten, but he played during our generation, is Chad Hennings. He was a linebacker for the Air Force Academy, and he went and served. He served 4 years, so he was over there in the first Desert Storm, right? He just got out of harm's way, but he came back to play for, I believe he played for the Cowboys and a couple other teams, and ended up with a good 7-8 year career. He's one of the ones we've always kind of glossed over. And one of the other ones that I'll just throw at you and we'll move on is, he's not on my list, but he came really close to. It's a guy by the name of Hobie Baker. And he is the only athlete to be named in the College Football and Hockey Hall of Fame. He went to Princeton. He served in World War I. He was the commander of the 103rd Aero Squadron. And long story short, Baker was killed just a few weeks after the war while he was still in the military flying a test plane back. So I like to give respect to him. On Veterans Day, we do an entire show, and this year it'll obviously be a 3-hour show. We do an entire show of this. This is all we do. We do deep dives. Today it's Memorial Day, so we've got a lot going on, so we'll move along a little bit, but we like to give the salutes to everybody. And as my wife's running around in the background, I'm hoping she didn't hear about our whole plan for me to get the pork butt going.
sales at Ross. There's a sales at Ross.
There's a sales at Ross. Buy none, get one free. I'm telling you, it was a deal. They would only take cash, so I don't have a receipt.
Look at all the money I saved. All this stuff was 30-40% off.
First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. And it's high, high, hey, the army's on its way. Proud of the day the sun is strong. For wherever we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along.
You're listening to Braves Country Baseball's Salute to Service Special, a compilation from our Armchair Quarterback radio show, which aired for 8 years on CBS Sports affiliates before changing to Braves Country. It's a compilation of shows that are going over some of our more famous athletes who served our country as well. And thank you for your service.
He's the armchair quarterback. He's full of beer and he's full of snacks. The all-American man with a groove in his head.
So who's number one on your list?
No disrespect to any of them that didn't make it. These are just four that, to me, brought me joy, and I enjoyed learning about them over the years as we've covered them. And my first one's Bob Feller. He's currently the oldest living Hall of Famer. He actually, in 1946, threw a 107-mile-an-hour fastball, second fastest pitch ever recorded. He was the first major leaguer to volunteer for active duty and enlisted in the Navy just 2 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Prior to his enlistment, he was arguably the best pitcher in the major league. He had already amassed 107 wins and led the American League in both wins and strikeouts the previous 3 seasons before the war. He returned to pitch in 1946 after missing 4 seasons, finished his comeback season with 348 strikeouts, a 2.18 ERA, and 36 complete games. I repeat, 36 complete games. That's Bob Feller.
It's pretty amazing. The first one I'm going to go to is Jackie Robinson. He was assigned to the Army unit, a segregated Army unit, after being drafted in 1942. Jackie Robinson subsequently was accepted in the officer candidate school and commissioned as a second lieutenant. He was later court-martialed in 1944 after being taken into custody by military police for refusing to move to the back of an army bus. So this is the precursor to the civil rights movement. He stood by his principles, and later on he would break the color barrier, as we all know. He was acquitted by an all-white panel of officers by the proceedings, kept him from being deployed with his tank battalion, but after being honorably discharged, Robinson signed with a Negro Baseball League team, and in 1947 became the first player to break baseball's America color line when he played with the Dodgers. He was also named the Rookie of the Year. That Rookie of the Year award is now called the Jackie Robinson Award. The second baseman went on to 6-time All-Star, 1949 NL MVP, and was a World Series champion of Robinson. And Robinson's famous 42 number is now retired throughout baseball. So that was my first one. Who else you got?
My next one's Rocky Bleier. Rocky's a 4-time Super Bowl champion with the Pittsburgh Steelers. After finishing his rookie season with the Steelers in '68, Bleier was drafted into the Army and volunteered for active duty in Vietnam. In '69, while on patrol, his platoon was ambushed, and he was hit in the leg with with a bullet, and a local or nearby grenade exploded and shot shrapnel into his leg. He later earned the Purple Heart and Bronze Star for his bravery. While he was recovering in an Army hospital, doctors told him he would never play football again. He reported back to the Steelers training camp the year later after being wounded in Vietnam. He couldn't walk without being in constant pain and spent the next 2 years trying to earn an active duty spot on the roster. The Steelers even waived him twice. His tenacity and off-season workouts helped him overcome his war wounds, and he earned an active spot on the roster in '74. In 1976, him and teammate Franco Harris rushed for 1,000 yards each and became the second tandem in history at that time to ever rush for 1,000 yards out of the backfield. Mercury Morris and Larry Zonker were the other two.
You know, with him, I grew up knowing about Rocky Bleier as a great running back. I don't ever remember anyone ever mentioning, until we started doing this, I don't ever remember them mentioning his service. And I can always see why he's high up on your list. It's just amazing. And maybe I was just oblivious because I was younger, or maybe it just wasn't well documented. I don't know. But until we started doing this, I didn't know this about a lot of the athletes. It's one of my favorite shows we do of the year because obviously the Veterans Day show is the big one where we do this deep dive for the entire show. But it's one of my favorite things because I think it gives listeners a better appreciation for what these men do. And some of this stuff will get us choked up. Like I've had to fight back tears several times, even though I've read the thing 2 or 3 times before I go on air, right? I'll still get choked up when you read some of this stuff. My number 2 is Christy Mathewson. Christy Mathewson, with the use of poisonous gas, a major concern for soldiers in World War I, the U.S. Army's Chemical Corps became a high-profile unit, which is where Christy Mathewson served. It was in this division that Mathewson served after his baseball career. In 1918, Mathewson enlisted and was sent to France, where he was accidentally gassed and developed tuberculosis. He died in 1925. Now, he had every intention of coming back and playing much longer. But when he came back, his evidently he had a hard time breathing, et cetera, et cetera. You can imagine what tuberculosis did. And back then, they didn't have all the regulations that they have in wartime like they do now. They had developed poisonous gas, and they were using on it. I mean, it was a terrible thing that the Germans were doing back then. But Christy Mathewson, no pun intended, took one for the U.S. team and got in there, but essentially gave his life. And I've always respected that because a lot of people also don't understand. Christy Mathewson is one of the greatest pitchers to ever play the game. Christy Mathewson finished with 373 wins, a 2.13 ERA, 2,500 strikeouts, back in a time where strikeouts did not happen. By the time, the Nolan Ryans and the Roger Clemens came around and they're hitting all these strikeout marks, and you're like, man, they strike them out a lot better than they used to. It's not that they were throwing faster. The key to the game back then was not to get struck out. Everyone went out of their way to make contact with the baseball. You were embarrassed. I even remember when I was growing up, it used to be a thing, and now it's no longer, no one cares anymore. But you used to be embarrassed to have to walk back to the dugout after a strikeout. So he played for the New York Giants from 1900 to 1916, and then he played with the famed Cincinnati Red Stockings from 16 to 18. He was on that Cincinnati team that that beat the Chi Sox. He's 2-time World Series champion, 2-time Triple Crown winner, NL wins leader 4 times, 5-time NL ERA leader, and 5-time strikeout leader. He pitched 2 no-hitters. 373 wins, he probably would have had up around 425-ish if he hadn't have gotten poisoned. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is just one of my favorite veterans to ever play the game, and that's Ted Williams. Teddy Ballgame, whatever you want to refer to him as, arguably the greatest hitter in Major League Baseball history. He hit .406 in 1941, the last time anybody's ever hit over 400. Williams, a veteran of 2 branches of the military, the Navy and Marine Corps, and a veteran of 2 wars, World War II and the Korean War. World War II, he served as a Navy flight instructor and never saw active duty. During the Korean War, Williams threw 39 successful combat missions for the Marine Corps. On one such mission, his plane suffered anti-aircraft fire that crippled his electrical systems and hydraulics, but he managed to fly the damaged plane back to an air base close to the front lines. For this, he was awarded the Air Medal. He lost a total of 5 seasons to military service for his country. And then the rest of the world, we just speculate what could have been had he not. But I'm so thankful that Ted did serve, and for that, I salute him.
Yeah, I think it's been well documented what Ted has done. I just don't think a lot of people have grasped what his numbers could have been, because that was right in the prime of his career both times. And
absolutely,
to think that, I mean, first of all, he would have been at least number 2 all time in home runs when he retired. Obviously, Hank Aaron passed later on down the road, but he most definitely would have beaten Willie Mays' numbers, and he might have beaten Babe Ruth. In fact, I was reading up on this yesterday, and he said that one of the things that touched him the most was that Babe Ruth made a comment to him very early in his career. Very early, Babe Ruth said to him, "You're one of the best I've ever seen. If anyone breaks my record, I hope it's you." And he said that he wore that as a badge of honor his entire career. That with Babe Ruth thought that I was one of the greatest ever. That had to have meant something, right?
Just, man, a quote like that, just letting it all sink in.
Yeah, ghosts talking to ghosts, and here you think about it. It was 100 years ago this coming fall that Babe Ruth was traded to the New York Yankees for no net. It's all about that Broadway show up there in Boston. I love poking Red Sox fans about that. My next one is Jack Loomis. After playing in 9 games for the New York Giants as a rookie defensive end, Jack Loomis enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1942, the first wave of troops to land on Iwo Jima in 1945 was his platoon. He remained on the island after the initial day to continue to battle the Japanese. Commanding Company E's 3rd Rifle Platoon March. On March 8th, Loomis was helped knock off 3 enemy strongholds despite suffering injuries from grenade shrapnel before being mortally wounded by a landmine while saving 2 others. Before dying, he famously told the field doctor, "Well, Doc, the New York Giants lost a hell of an end today." Loomis was awarded the Medal of Honor. What's your number 4?
Well, my number 4 is I'm going to come full circle with Memorial Day and talk about the baddest dude on the planet, Mr. Pat Tillman. He was an enigma, and especially in today's age of prima donnas and athletes that are chasing dollars and fame, Pat turned that down. He actually did the unimaginable. After the September 11th terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers, Tillman turned down a multi-million-dollar contract with the Cardinals to enlist in the Army. Him and his brother, who was an aspiring baseball player, both became Army Rangers and went down to Fort Benning, Georgia. They did multiple tours of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. Tragically, Tillman was killed over in Afghanistan and paid the ultimate price, and that is what we need to keep in mind this Memorial Day, is these guys and their sacrifices and what they've done for our country. And Pat Tillman, I thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I think he's probably one of the most talked about ones. When we do Veterans Day, we have people send theirs in as well. And Pat Tillman's usually the number 1 for obvious reasons. It's this generation.
It is, and that's the reason my list is the way it was. I didn't want to memorialize anyone but for Tillman. Man, just the unselfishness in an individual to, well, for anybody that signs up for that kind of duty, but to be in the walk of life that he was in and the situations and the income, and to just put it all aside and do what he felt was necessary.
Well, he did, if you think about it, he did what Ted Williams did. And a lot of them did in World War II. World War II was commonplace. When Tillman did it, everyone was like, what are you, nuts? Because this has become a me society. Pat Tillman put his country first.
Amen.
If Pat Tillman would have done that in the 1940s, nothing would have been thought of it because several guys did it, right? But,
yeah, it's true. It wouldn't have even been talked about as much. I mean, obviously, just like Loomis, it would have been brought up and we would still talk about it, but it wouldn't have been as big a deal.
Bob Kalsu is my last one. He's the only professional football player to lose his life in the Vietnam War. Kalsu was killed on July 21st, 1970, after his unit came under enemy mortar fire just hours after his wife gave birth to their second child. That part always gets to me. She was informed of her husband's death. In addition to being an All-American tackle at University of Oklahoma, Kalsu was also in Oklahoma's ROTC. To satisfy the program's responsibility, Kalsu was sent to Vietnam in November of '69 as a second lieutenant. Just 1 year earlier, he had been selected by the Buffalo Bills in the 8th round of the draft and started the entire '68 season. Kalsu was named the Buffalo Bills Rookie of the Year in his efforts. And then just a year after entering, he lost his life. One other person that I want to mention, because I couldn't find his info earlier, was Jerry Coleman. And that's because he ended up becoming a Hall of Fame broadcaster, so we can relate to him. Not that we're ever going to be Hall of Fame broadcasters, but...
You speak for yourself over there.
Yeah, well, I am.
I'll sign you an autograph, don't you worry.
Thanks, buddy. But Coleman was the only major league player to have seen combat in 2 major wars. Coleman first postponed the start of his career as a Marine aviator in World War II, and then left baseball to fly in the Korean War, during which he escaped a scary crash. In all, he flew 120 combat missions, was awarded 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses and 13 Air Medals. The Colonel, as they called him, went on to win 4 World Series as a second baseman with the New York Yankees. He then went on to a lengthy broadcasting career, earning an induction to the Broadcasters Wing in the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2005, and in the Radio Hall of Fame in 2007. So I want to make sure I mentioned Jerry Coleman. For some reason, I couldn't find his info a second ago. What's your favorite Memorial Day foods?
It's a big grill out for me. I'm just a hamburger and hot dog guy on Memorial Day weekend.
That's essentially what we're doing. I'll probably bust out some old rib action on the 4th of July. I've been shot down by a couple ideas by the wife already, but Billy and I were talking about ways that I could sneak a pork butt in. So, I'm on a mission now. I don't know, baby. It just showed up. It's free delivery.
I don't know what happened here.
A fan sent it in.
I think one of them drones flew by and dropped it off. It's just, a mispick on the new delivery service. Sorry.
Billy's suggestion was for me to use the story that it was on sale at Ross's. Dollar Tree. No, baby, this is at the dollar. It's at the dollar store. We got it. It's $1. Every time Amazon shows up with something for me, I was like, it was free.
They were giving them away down at the station.
What's one of your go-to patriotic songs? Mine's especially on a weekend like this, is Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. God Bless the USA.
That's my go-to.
Does that not just get your blood pumping for some reason?
It does, and I hope they're listening right now. But I actually know people that don't like that song, and I have the argument. How do you even exist in society and not like that song? Is there a culture of people that really don't like that song?
Dirty Commie Bum, I'll tell you that. I'll tell you what, we've been playing West Cook bands.
Take that, my boss. I hope you're listening.
He's like, I hope you're listening. You're working Memorial Day
It's going
weekend.
to be interesting in 17 minutes from now, but until then, I'm going to enjoy.
The more and more that I hear it, the West Cook band's I Stand for the Flag. I really like that song a lot too. It's a really good song, really good patriotic song, and basically it was written about, it's not about whether or not he wasn't being political. He was basically in the lyrics, if you listen to it, he's just saying, I stand for the flag because the flag stands for us. And I think it's really well written and really well performed. So you're listening to Braves Country Baseball's Salute to Service Special, a compilation from our Armchair Quarterback radio show, which aired for 8 years on CBS Sports affiliates before changing to Braves Country. It's a compilation of shows that are going over some of our more famous athletes who served our country as well. Happy Memorial Day to everyone out there, and thank you for your service. Let's go ahead and dive into. Gave everyone one athlete that they looked up to or whatnot they do for their service. What athlete did you choose today?
And I didn't listen to the first two rounds, but
that's fine.
Pat Tillman's probably got to be one of the top ones.
Even if you're saying someone that someone else has already said, we've got votes going on all of our social media platforms, and he's blowing everyone away right now. For obvious reasons.
Yes, it's a cool scene. Just when what he did, just after 9/11 and all that, just wanted to give back to his country. So,
I can't argue with that. What Justin and I talked about was that if he would have done that in the 1940s, it would not have been looked upon as that great of a deal because they all did it. But what he did at the time that he did in this very selfish society we live in now, to do what he did, turning down all that money, was pretty incredible. I have to agree. My favorite is always going to be Christy Mathewson, just because, him and Jerry Coleman, because Jerry Coleman ended up being a Hall of Fame broadcaster for Hall of Fame baseball broadcaster, and he was 4-time World Series winner for the New York Yankees at second base, and served in combat. But Christy Mathewson, he is one of the greatest pitchers of all time. More people talk about Walter Johnson because he had a few more wins than Mathewson, but Mathewson was right there with him. And this is in the dead ball era, so their numbers are a little skewed, but a 2.13 ERA lifetime is pretty incredible. Now, realize scoring just didn't happen much back then because there was a lot of reasons. The number one reason the dead ball era is they did not, what a lot of people don't know about the dead ball is they did not change the baseball out much. And what that led to, by the end of the ball game, you usually were playing with
a dead ball.
Right. It was a ball that was been smacked around. A lot of time it was wobbly. A lot of time it had dirt all over it. It was hard to see. That came to an end, I believe it was 1919 or 1920, when a gentleman came up to the plate and was hit in the temple by one of the balls because he didn't see it. They were playing it around dusk, and the ball was, from all accounts, the ball was essentially gray. and he didn't see it. It killed him instantly right there on the at home plate, and that's what changed.
Oh, wow.
That's what changed the rules of them saying after every so often. Of course, they upped it now, but at the time they were like, we're new baseball every inning, and then of course now it's new baseball almost every pitch. But what led to that directly after that rule, was all of a sudden Babe Ruth was slamming home runs out of the building. And so that had a lot to do with why Babe Ruth was out hitting teams. He had the year that he hit 54 home runs, he was out hitting teams. So he was ahead of the curve, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were actually using real fresh live baseballs. So that's why Mathewson's always one of my favorites, is because it always brings up that kind of conversation. He died because of poisonous gas that he inhaled fighting the Germans in World War I, came back and he developed tuberculosis. So on that happy note.
I know that's interesting.
Yeah, well, on Veterans Day, if you ever want to hear a really good show, Veterans Day, we do deep dives on a lot of players that a lot of people don't know. You know, there are athletes that you know of them. You just had no idea their contribution to society. It's dumbfounding. Every year we find more and more. We've been doing this for about 5 years on Veterans Day. The reason why this is the first time for us doing it on Memorial Day weekend is this is the first time that we've been daily show. And B, a lot of times in the past, we have actually taken a hiatus until about mid-June on the Armchair Quarterbacks to recharge our batteries, so to speak. So we haven't been on in broadcasting during Memorial Day. So this year we decided to do Mount Rushmore, and then also get everyone else's opinion. What's your go-to food this weekend for Memorial Day?
Man, probably hamburgers, hot dogs. Just keep it simple.
Yeah, it seems like to be everyone's go-to. I get a little more creative on 4th of July. 4th of July, I'll end up busting out ribs and everything and slow cooking and doing some more old-fashioned barbecue. I might do a pork butt today, but that's pretty simple in my world. I like to really dial it up a little bit when it comes to 4th of July. And
well, 4th of July, I usually try to get around 54, 55 hot dogs, but that's just America.
Well, I can usually knock that out in about 10 minutes. So the key is everyone thinks the key is to drinking water with it. The key is to just not give a crap what you look like afterwards. And so now you have figured out the secrets to my physique.
You are a champion, sir.
I am. Still undefeated. Anywho, back to the rest of the story. One thing I forgot to ask you, do you prefer slaw, macaroni, or potato salad?
Yes.
All three of them just mixed together?
All three, man. I'm a foodie, man. As long as it's good, I want it.
What's your favorite of those three?
A good coleslaw, man. A good coleslaw.
Yeah, me too. Especially if I'm putting it on. So I competed in a contest up in New York. I think this was 2011, summer of 2011. It was somewhere in that area. It's either 11 or 12.
Did they know it was a contest?
Well, they did after I left. The guy that I was working for bragged about how he was always the best in the Hamptons for burgers and how buddies of his won this and that. So I joked with them all summer. I said, well, that's because you never had a Southern chef come in there. And they would laugh, whatever, da-da-da-da-da. Well, I gave him such a hard time. This was the boss that owned the restaurant I worked for in the Hamptons. People aren't familiar with the Hamptons. It's eastern Long Island. It's an uppity area. This is where Jerry Seinfeld lives, right? I mean, this is the money of the money. And
he has a horse named Prickly Pete.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. But sincerely, when I lived out there in the Hamptons that summer, all I saw were celebrities. I saw a lot of celebrities when I lived in Nashville and worked in the bar business there. And then I saw like the cream of the crop celebrities when I was out in the Hamptons. These are the people that are the movers and the shakers. I mean, people like Kelly Ripa would walk in and no one even bats an eye because she's not a big enough name. And you're like, really? By the way, she's scary skinny. I mean, she'll freak you out a little bit how skinny she is. I'm really worried about that one. But anyways, she's probably saying, there's this old fat dude. I wonder if he's still alive.
Is there a coleslaw, a mayonnaise-based coleslaw?
Yes. So I won best slaw, best barbecue, and best burger that year. And I mean, it was like a drop the mic moment. But they gave me less than 48 hours to prepare. They walked in, it was like right around 34 hours, I think it was, right for the competition. Said, okay, Big Mouth, if you think you can beat us, be out there Saturday morning, da-da-da-da-da-da. I was like, I got to work all day today. This is a Friday, right? I was like, I got to work all day. Like, so? You said you're the best? I was like, oh, I see what you did. That's okay. So when I got off work that night, that's what I did. I started cooking my pork butts, slow cooked it. And then I put my burgers together and I put my slaw together that next morning and went out there and won all 3 medals. I mean, it was like a drop the mic. I gave him so much crap the rest of the summer. It was awesome. This is right before 4th of July weekend, and I was there until the end of Labor Day. So you can imagine.
I'm sure you wasn't quiet.
I was not. He'd come in, he owned the place. He'd come in and say something about, hey, did we get the shipment of fish in yet? I was like, no, but I know what we did do. We won 3 medals 4 weeks ago. Anytime I could slide it in there, it would be a thing.
I just, with Memorial Day and being on a sports show, I just wanted to give a shout out to a great player who died in Vietnam in 1970. His name was Bob Katsu. He was Rookie of the Year for the Buffalo Bills back in 1969. His brother went to Vietnam, and he joined him. He died in action in 1970, and that's who I wanted to give a shout out to him, remember him, and a shout out to his family on this upcoming Memorial Day.
You're listening to Braves Country Baseball's Salute to Service Special, a compilation from our Armchair Quarterback radio show, which aired for 8 years on CBS Sports affiliates before changing to Braves Country. It's a compilation of shows that are going over some of our more famous athletes who served our country as well. And thank you for your service.
He's the armchair quarterback. He's full of beer and he's full of snacks. The all-American man with a cool one in his head.
Hello, welcome to the Armchair Quarterbacks. This is our Veterans Day special.
Because he's the armchair quarterback. He's full of beer and he's full of snacks. The all-American man with a cool one in his head.
Hi, I'm Mac Magee sitting alongside Justin Waller, and we are the Armchair Quarterbacks. We are doing a very special edition of the Armchair Quarterbacks tonight. We are going to do a special Veterans Day edition, and what that means is we're going to dive into several athletes that you may or may not know their background that have served for our great country. So crack yourself a cold one, pull up a chair, kick up your feet. This isn't about deciding who's going to win or lose this weekend. This is about respecting our veterans. Give a special thanks to all the veterans, the ones that are currently in harm's way, the ones that are enlisted, anyone that has served, any veterans of foreign war, everybody that has ever put on a United States military uniform. Welcoming on to the show is Justin Waller. Justin, how are you?
Doing good, Mac. Excited for this great Veteran Day show we got planned and ready to get into it.
Yeah, I think people are going to like it. We did this a couple of years ago, and it continues to be one of our favorite shows that we've ever done. We didn't get into it last year because there were some technical problems that week. But it's back, and we're trying to make this an annual event, and I think you're going to like what we have in store for you. We are going to spend the next hour or so talking nothing but our U.S. soldiers, our military in general, and also the history behind some of the athletes that have played some of our great games and have defended our great country. Okay, without further ado, Mr. Waller, why don't you take it away with Pat Tillman?
First of all, I just want to salute all of our vets out there. Thank you for what you do. This country is nothing without you guys. I appreciate it, and just thank you, man. For those of you out there listening, on Veterans Day, I think you should do it more than just Veterans Day, but make sure you say thank you to a vet tomorrow. If you see one walking around, man, just grab their hand. It's easy, and just say thank you for your service. I mean, it's not like you got to go anything more than that, and it'll mean a lot to those guys. So tip your cap to them and just give thanks. But Patrick Daniel Tillman was a professional player in the NFL who actually left his sports career in the middle to join the United States Army in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. He started his college career as a linebacker for Arizona State University in '94. He actually secured the last remaining scholarship for the team. He excelled as a linebacker at Arizona State when actually he was small for his position at 5'11". As a junior, he helped his team to go undefeated that season and make it to the Rose Bowl that year. In '97, he was voted Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year. Academically, Tillman majored in marketing and graduated 3.5 years on a 3.85 GPA. In the 1998 draft, Tillman was selected at the 226th pick by the Arizona Cardinals. At that time, he moved over to play safety for the Cardinals and started 10 of 16 games his rookie season. One of the great things about Tillman that I find interesting is that his loyalty and dedication for what he had with his moral compass is just unheard of, and I wish we had more athletes that carried themselves this way. He actually turned down a 5-year, $9 million contract offer from the St. Louis Rams just out of loyalty for the Cardinals. He finished his career with a total of 238 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 3 interceptions for 37 yards, 3 forced fumbles, 12 pass deflections, and 3 fumble recoveries in a 60 career game. In May 2002, 8 months after the September 11th attacks, after completing the 15 remaining games of the 2001 season which followed the attacks, Tillman turned down a contract offer of $3.6 million over the next 3 years from the Cardinals to go enlist in the U.S. Army. Tillman and his brother Kevin enlisted on May 31st, 2002. His brother Kevin actually gave up the chance of a career in baseball who had already signed with the Cleveland Indians. I mean, what siblings? Both of them are pro athletes making millions of dollars and just walk away from it to go serve. In September 2002, they completed basic training together. The two brothers completed the Ranger program in late 2002 and were assigned to the 2nd Ranger Battalion in Fort Lewis, Washington. After participating in the initial invasion of Operation Iraqi Freedom in September 2003, they entered Ranger School at Fort Benning, Georgia, and both graduated that following November of 2003. Tillman was then redeployed to Afghanistan, and on April 22nd, 2004, he was initially reported to have been killed by enemy combatants and actually turned out to have been friendly fire. But that is not a part of the story. The main thing to know about Pat Tillman is the man and his sibling, I include Kevin in this, they walked away from major league careers in two different sports, millions of dollars, to go fight for their country post 9/11 and paid the ultimate sacrifice. And that is Pat Tillman.
Yeah, got to give him a big salute. For those of y'all that aren't old enough to have remembered that time, it was a very emotional time when you saw those towers fall. A lot of people might wonder, why would you leave a great high-paying job in the National Football League to go defend your country? There was a rush of emotion and nationalism that took over this country for a little while that unfortunately has since faded right after the falling of those towers that I'll never forget. I was a little too old at the time to be able to just jump in there and join in, but I was honestly thinking about it. I got talked out of it by my family, but when you saw those towers fall, I mean, it really hit home for a lot of people, and I can totally understand why he did what he did. Okay, the next guy up is Ted Williams, 17-time All-Star. Just wrap your head around that, 17-time All-Star. A 2-time recipient of the AL MVP award, 6-time batting champion, 2-time Triple Crown winner. What? Hard enough to win one of those suckers. He won that sucker twice. He finished his playing career with a .344 batting average, which is still, I believe, top 6 all-time. Memory serves me correct. I know Ty Cobb is number 1 with .367. He's up there in the top 6 or 7 of all time. 521 home runs. He did that back when 500-run plateau was something to behold. There was a long period of time where he was the number 3 home run hitter of all time. And a lot of people don't realize that because then we hit the steroid era and there's kind of gets misconstrued. But for argument's sake, along with the 42 on-base percentage, you want to talk about all these analytics and whatnot. You throw his numbers in at these analytic nerds, they just jaw drop. Bang for the buck, my opinion, Ted Williams is the greatest hitter of all time. The only one else that can be in the conversation is Babe Ruth, and it really depends on what you consider the greatest. But I've always considered.
I'll agree. Ted Williams has got my nod too.
He's the greatest hitter. Babe Ruth's the greatest player of all time. His batting average is the highest of any MLB player with 302 or more home runs. Born and raised in San Diego, joined the Red Sox in 1939. He immediately emerges as one of the sport's best hitters. In the 1941, this is right before World War II really took off. Remember, World War II was, for all intents and purposes, we were dragged into it December 1st, 1947, when they bombed Pearl Harbor. So at the end of the 41 season, Williams posted a .406 batting average, making him the last Major League Baseball player to hit 400 in a season. There was the 406 batting average, and no one's done it since then, and that was before World War II. So think about that. Think about how hard that is. He followed it up by winning his first Triple Crown in 42. And then Williams' career was interrupted in 43 to serve 3 years in the U.S. Navy Marine Corps during World War II. Upon returning to MLB in 46, Williams won his first AL MVP award. So basically,
when he was in the Marines, in the Navy, he was a fighter pilot. So he basically got out of the he got out of the cockpit and walked over and got himself an AL MVP award. I mean, it was just like that. It's incredible what the man did. In 47, he won his second Triple Crown. Williams returned to active military duty for portions of the 52 and 53 seasons to serve as a Marine combat aviator in the Korean War. In 57 and 58, at ages 39 and 40, he was the AL batting champion for the fifth and sixth time. Williams retired in 1960, inducted into the Hall of Fame in 66 in his first year of eligibility. Williams managed the Senators and Rangers franchise from 69 to 72, and after that became one avid fisherman, and pretty much did that for the rest of his life. In 1991, George H.W. Bush presented Williams with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian award bestowed by the U.S. government. He was selected for the Major League Baseball all-time team in 97 and the MLB all-century team in 99. And let me tell you something. When they came out on the field in 99 for the all-century team, now this was the best of the best that were still living. Both current players and then, of course, retired players. Everybody circled the wheelchair of Ted Williams. That's how you know you're not just a good player. You're not just a great player. You're not an all-timer. You're not a legend. Ted Williams was a god. I mean, that's all there is to it. And when your peers are all in awe of you, that tells you something that you're doing something right. The U.S. Navy and Marine Corps in 42, Williams was drafted into the military, being put into Class 1A. A friend of Williams suggested that Williams see the advisor for the Governor's Selective Service Appeal agent, since Williams was the sole support of his mother, arguing that Williams should not have been placed in Class 1A, and said Williams should be reclassified to 3A. The attorney took the case to the appeals board and rejected the case. Angry, the attorney took the case to the president's board. Williams was reclassified to 3A 10 days later. Afterwards, the public reaction was extremely negative. Quaker Oats stopped sponsoring Williams, and Williams, who was previously had eaten Quaker Oats products all time since... Sorry, something doesn't make sense here. Anyways, despite the trouble with the draft board, Williams had a new salary of $30,000 in 1942. Williams won the Triple Crown with a .356 batting average, 36 home runs, 137 RBIs. He was the third Red Sox player to hit 100 home runs with the team, following his teammates Jimmy Fox and Joe Cronin. Despite winning the Triple Crown, Williams came in second in the MVP voting, losing to Joe Gordon of the Yankees. Williams felt that he should have gotten a little more consideration. I mean, that's a little ridiculous. You win the Triple Crown and you don't get the MVP. Tell me there's not a Yankee bias out there somewhere. I mean, come on. Come on. The Triple Crown? What else can you do?
It's perfect games, I guess. I don't know that you can add to that. You win the Triple Crown, you should be MVP.
Yeah, and I don't want to hear about how, because back then only two teams made the playoffs anyway, so you can't say, well, his team to make the playoffs, because that's a ridiculous statement in itself. And if you win the Triple Crown, I don't care if your team didn't win a single freaking game, you're still the MVP. Not your fault. You go out there and rake over 300, hit freaking 40 bombs, and I'm guessing around, what was it, the 140 mark in RBIs. That's not your fault. But anyways, to wrap this up with Ted Williams, the biggest thing that I always remember about Ted Williams is he said that when he was growing up, what motivated him since he was, I think he said 8 years old was the first time that it motivated him, is that he wanted people to be able to walk down the street and point at him and go, "There's Ted Williams, the best damn hitter that ever lived." And I'm pretty sure he accomplished that goal. If he's not the best, he's right there. There's only a few that you could even argue, but top to bottom, average, power, everything. And the guy lost 5 of his peak seasons of his career to war. There's no telling what kind of numbers he would have put up. I guarantee you his home run number would have creeped up very, very close to Babe Ruth. Because you're talking about, he finished with 521. Ruth was just under 200. And that was right in the heart of his career. He was hitting 35 to 40 home runs. I mean, you do the math, he would have been right there. 5 years. Five years at 40 home runs. I mean, that's 200 more home runs right there. I mean, that's right there at the 714 mark.
I mean, he still has records that people would be chasing, but if he played those 5 years, he might have some uncatchable records. Like Cal Ripken's streak kind of record. You're not touching that for a very, 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 very long time, if it ever gets touched.
And considering, you're big time when, like I was talking about before, when the greats of the greats are surrounding you. I mean, we're talking about, I remember it was, I distinctly remember it was McGuire and Sosa and Jeter, and they were all surrounding his wheelchair, and they were all talking to him. And he always had this question that he would ask hitters. I heard this the other day, and he would ask him, "Do you ever smell the wood burn?" And he said that if a guy told him he didn't know what he was talking about, then the guy wasn't a great hitter. He said, but if the guy did know what he was talking about, then he knew that he was a great hitter. And to a man, and I'm trying to remember who it was, but there was a lower rank player, and it was one of those journeyman type players that ended up going to broadcasting because he was telling the story. And so anyways, it was Ted Williams, Tony Gwynn. There was a third great hitter, and I want to say, I may not be doing this story justice, but I want to say it was McGuire. And the three of them, plus this guy who was interviewing them, they were all talking, and he brought that up. "Do you ever smell the wood burn?" And the guy said, "I don't ever smell the wood burn." When Williams looked at the other guys and said, "Yeah, he wouldn't."
And that's not something you can come back from, because Ted Williams says something about hitting. You just shut up and listen.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't come back from that one.
The story I definitely do remember, it was Tony Gwynn telling the story. He was broadcasting one night and happened to catch it before Tony passed. And he said that he was talking to Williams one night at a function. I'm going to guess it was a Hall of Fame function. And Williams was talking to him. This is still when Gwynn was playing. So late 80s-ish, mid to late 80s. And Williams asked Gwynn, "Do you how are you hitting that inside fastball?" And Gwynn said something like, "Well, I don't really focus on that." He goes, "That's the key for left-handed hitter, is you've got to hit that inside fastball. You've got to let them know that you can hit that out of the park." And Gwynn went to argue with him. This is pretty early in Gwynn's career. Went to argue with him and said, "Ted, I'm not the same hitter you are. I'm not looking for the inside fastball to yank it out of the stadium. I'm looking for this and that. And I'm trying to, and Williams, I guess, got kind of heated with him because it doesn't matter. Can you hit the inside fastball out of the park? Because if you can do whatever the hell you want to. So I guess anyways, I guess they got kind of heated because Gwynn was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And Ted Williams, the same reaction. So here's the funny thing. The very next season, Gwynn's playing. And Gwynn said he starts noticing, after having that conversation with Ted, he hit about 3 or 4 home runs that year with inside fastballs that were coming in. He was raking them out of the park. So the next time he runs into Williams later on that summer, whatever it was, he said he couldn't wait to come to him. He come running up to him. He said, Ted, and he said, Williams turned around and looked at him and said, you finally learned how to hit that damn inside fastball, didn't you? It's like you said, you don't argue hitting with Ted Williams. I mean that's like that's like arguing any kind of anything with Einstein.
I mean, kids to this day are still dreaming from Little League all the way up to they want to bat 406. They want to bat Ted Williams numbers. I mean, that you just can't argue that. That greatest hitter.
That hit will.
And I agree with you. Could be up there in the talk of player. I mean, I agree that I think Ruth has got to be that. But, man, what it could have been, which I'm glad he did serve. That's, thank you for that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But as a sports fan, you just wonder if you had those 5 years, how big could those numbers have been?
And as only Ted Williams could do, he finished his career, his last at bat in Fenway Park with the home run. Not to mention the year that he hit 406. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do remember he went into that day hitting 399.6 something. Anyways, it would have rounded out to be a 400. And the Red Sox manager gave him the opportunity to sit the day out. They were playing a doubleheader. I want to say against Detroit, but I don't remember who they were playing. And Ted Williams told the manager, no, I'm going to play. He said, man, if you don't play, they're going to round it out. You will be a 400 season. And Ted Williams told him, to hell with that. I either hit 400 or I didn't hit 400, but we're going to find out today. Williams went out and went 6 for 8 in that doubleheader, and that's how he ended up at 406. That's clutch. Okay, what you got next? Is that Rocky Bleier time?
It is Rocky Bleier time. Did you know, I'd like to be a little part of this family. They're from Appleton, Wisconsin. Mom and Dad owns a tavern, and they live above it. Could you imagine that growing up? Just... Hey, Mac, let's run downstairs and grab some breakfast.
I think I lived that growing up. What are you talking about? Last name is McGee. Anyways, go ahead.
Robert Patrick Rocky Bleier. NFL halfback for the Pittsburgh Steelers from 1968, and then again from 71 to 1980. Bleier played his college football at the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana, and graduated in 68 with a degree in business management. During his junior season in 66, the Fighting Irish won the national championship, and he was the team captain as a senior in 67. He was selected in the 16th round of the 68 draft by the Pittsburgh Steelers, number 417 overall. After his rookie season with the Steelers, Bleier was drafted to the U.S. Army in December 1968 during the Vietnam War. He volunteered for duty in the South Vietnam and shipped out for Vietnam in May 69 and was assigned to the C Company, 4th Battalion, 31st Infantry, and assigned as a squad grenadier operating a 44mm M79 grenade launcher. On August 20th, while on patrol out in Heat Duke, Bleier was wounded in the left thigh by an enemy rifle bullet when his platoon was ambushed crossing a rice field. While he was down, an enemy grenade landed nearby after bouncing off a fellow soldier, sending shrapnel into his lower right leg. He lost part of his right foot in the blast and was later awarded the Bronze Star, and Purple Heart. While he was recovering in a hospital in Tokyo, doctors told him that he could not play football ever again. Soon after that, he received a postcard from Steelers owner Art Rooney, which read, "Rock, the team's not doing well. We need you, Art Rooney." When asked about it later, Bleier said, "When you have somebody that takes the time and interest to send you a postcard, something that they didn't have to do, you have a special place for those kind of people." After several surgeries, he was discharged from the military in July 1970 and began informal workouts with the Steelers. He rejoined them in camp in 1970. Upon his return, he couldn't walk without being in pain and only weighed 180 pounds. He was put on IR for the season, but returned in 71 and played on special teams. He spent several seasons trying to get increased playing time and was waived on 2 different occasions. But Bleier never gave up and said that he worked so hard, and to quote him, that he worked so hard that sometime in the future you didn't have to ask yourself, what if? An off-season training regimen brought Bleier back to 212 pounds in the summer of 74, and he earned a spot in the Steelers starting lineup. Since Preston Pearson was wearing the number 26, that was the number Bleier wore his rookie season before he went to Vietnam, Bleier switched to the number 20 when he returned back to the starting lineup. After Pearson was traded to the Cowboys in 75, Bleier kept the number 20, which he had already become associated with. In addition to being a great lead blocker, Bleier was also the second of the Steelers' rushing weapons. Franco Harris was their primary back, and Bleier was the second option. Both were effective nonetheless at both blocking and rushing. In 76, both Harris and Bleier rushed for over 1,000 yards, making this the second NFL duo to accomplish this feat after Morris and Larry Zonka of the 72 Dolphins. Bleier played in the first 4 Steelers Super Bowl victories and caught the touchdown pass from Terry Bradshaw that gave Pittsburgh a lead it would never surrender. He also recovered Dallas's onside kick on the closing seconds, sealing the Steelers' victory. Bleier retired after the 1980 season with 3,865 rushing yards, 136 receptions for 1,294 yards and 25 touchdowns. At the time of his retirement, he was the Steelers' 4th all-time leading rusher. Got tongue twisted there. 4th all-time leading rusher. I still can't say it.
He run real good.
That is, yeah. He ran good for the Iron Curtain.
I just ran.
Yeah.
Those 4 years of college will sure do go by fast. Yeah, I mean, Rocky Bleier, I can remember he was retiring as I was just first starting to watch football, so he's really more of a name that I knew growing up as opposed to really remembering him play. I saw him towards the tail end because it was him and Bradshaw towards the tail end of his career. But Rocky Bleier, I mean, he was a name in the NFL. He was every bit of a name as a running back in the NFL as Marshawn Lynch was. I think that's a fairly good analogy, and for the right reasons, not for the goofy stuff that Marshawn Lynch did. I'm talking about as far as being just a really good running back.
Yeah, I mean, just the heart that he had to come back. You know, I mean, he was wounded in action, lost part of his foot, come back, was cut twice, couldn't even make the practice squad, played in special teams, and wouldn't give up. And he put a lot of that to Art Rooney, mailing him a postcard while he was over there wounded, and it was just like, you know, he didn't have to do it, and I'm going to go out here and give my all. And he eventually worked himself back to a starting position. And, I mean, to be in that backfield with Blanco and both of you have 1,000 yards, that's a great accomplishment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was, and I mean, he was. Let's be honest. He was on one of the greatest teams of all time. I mean, the Steel Curtain of the '70s, they're still highly revered. Okay, I got some more rapid fire ones. I'm gonna try to knock out one, and then I'm try to knock 2 of these out before the top of the hour, and then when we come back, we'll get into your Art Donovan and Joe DiMaggio. I think one of the ones that I want to make sure that we hit this guy up, because I know he's near and dear to your heart, and I don't believe we talked about him on the first Veterans Day show we did a couple years ago. But Ahmad Hall of the played for the Tennessee Titans. After graduating from high school, Hall enlisted in the United States Marine Corps from 98 to 2002 as a field radio operator, a sergeant with a tour of duty in Afghanistan under his belt. He then enrolled at the University of Texas. Once his time in the military ended, he walked onto the Texas football team as a fullback and was on the national championship team when Texas beat Southern Cal, the famous Vince Young team. He was on that field. Although he was not drafted, Hall eventually signed with the Tennessee Titans in 2006 and played 14 games in his rookie year and actually had a pretty decent career in the NFL. But when he was with the Tennessee Titans, I know he was always a crowd favorite. And if you go onto our Facebook page and you see our updated profile picture, the guy running onto the field with the flag in his hand, and could say it high-fiving, he's really low-fiving a soldier as he's running out on the field. That's Ahmad Hall.
Yeah. I mean, he was a bruiser too. He was a Jeff Fisher back, was he not? I mean, in that system, he wasn't the superstar on the team, but you knew when you got done playing a game with him lining up across from you, because he would run you over.
Yeah, and he actually played for the Titans from 2006 to 2011. So he wasn't a flash in the pan. I mean, that's a good little.
To be quite honest, that team's been missing an Ahmad Hall. We've been looking for it.
Well, it says here he's only 36, so somebody needs to give him a call. He was the guy that, what was the fullback's name that went out there and blocked for, that left the Titans and went out there and blocked for LT out there in San Diego? What was that tight end? I said tight end. The fullback for the Titans. Do you remember who I'm talking about?
I do, but you're going to hit me with it on air, so I'm just going to crickets.
Anyways, at the time, he was looked upon as the best in the game, but Hall basically took his spot. Man, that's going to drive me nuts till I think of his name. It was a great fullback, but and of course Hall did more than just played fullback. He also played quite a bit of special teams and whatnot too for the Titans. But anyways, that's Ahmad Hall, and he was always a crowd favorite. And whatever he's doing now, I hope he's doing well. And once again, thank you for your service. Here is I think fairly unknown, famous in the sports world, but I don't think a lot of people knew that he served. Mr. Tom Landry of the Dallas Cowboys. He was the head coach of the Cowboys. He was the one that started the whole America's team. He's the one that, if you ever see the old pictures, walk around in the houndstooth cap. Look just like the kind of cap that Bear Bryant wore. So even though he was best known for his success as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Tom Landry was also a Pro Bowl selection player with the New York Giants as a player. And then Landry also played at the University of Texas, once again another Texas guy. But his college experience was interrupted by World War II in the U.S. Air Force. A lot of these guys that we've done over the past were not Air Force guys, so I figured it's about time that we pick an Air Force guy. Assigned to the 860th Bomb Squadron as a co-pilot in a B-17 Flying Fortress bomber, Landry served 30 combat missions and once survived a crash landing after his plane ran out of fuel in the Pacific. So that's Tom Landry, and I don't think a lot of people realize what that he actually had a pretty nice military career along with Hall of Fame head coach, and realistically, the reason why the Dallas Cowboys are America's team to this day.
Tom Landry.
You do remember Landry, right?
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember Tom Landry.
Okay. I know he was, when was his last year? Probably 89. That was right around the time that Jimmy Johnson took over. 89 was probably Jimmy Johnson's first year, so I guess his last year was 88. But he was iconic. When he was given the axe, it was a bummer. It really was. You know, the one thing that I liked about Tom Landry, even though I was never a Cowboy fan, although ironically the first jersey I ever owned was not Emmitt Smith. Jesus, I can't believe I just said Emmitt Smith. Tony Dorsett jersey was the very first jersey I ever owned, and it was basically because I had choice between that and I don't remember what the other ones was. But we were in a store. My mom told me which one do I want. I wanted Tony Dorsett because I knew who he was, kind of thing. But what always stuck out with me with Landry in the Cowboys was he was very innovative. When they talk about Bill Walsh and all these other guys being innovative on offense, he was extremely innovative. He was the kind of guy that would come up with any kind of a trick play. He was constantly, he was the king of the flea flickers and the reverses and the hook and laterals and all that stuff. Tom Landry's Dallas Cowboy teams were fun to watch. So not only did they win, they were exciting, and I think that's why they became America's team.
He was playing chess when everybody else was playing checkers. That's the kind of coach he was. I mean, he could beat you with a game plan and execute it. And he had a way to get that across to his players. Because, I mean, anybody can draw those plays up, but to know when to play them, when to use them, and to be able to have your players execute them, the man was playing chess. And that was Landry.
Now that we're sitting here talking about it, life's come full circle. I think I'm going to have to go out and find me an old Tony Dorsett jersey.
Hey, man, I still rock the old Merino jersey. I catch heck for it, too, because it's the old three-quarter length sleeve. Yeah, I mean, the way jerseys used to be. So, yeah, I'm all in it. Go get you that old school jersey.
Oh, yeah, I still have my Merino old school jersey. You know what kind of old school jersey I have in Merino? They didn't make these for very long, but, man, I wish they would because they were really killer. I have the reversible jerseys of the damn Merino. And they did not make those for very long, but, man, I'll tell you what, not only are they comfortable, because, first of all, they're warm because they're double knitted, right? But I love that thing, and I wear it every single fantasy draft day. That's the only time that I bust that sucker out, but every year I bust that sucker out. You laugh, man.
Wear it every day.
But it's sharp.
Wear it every day.
It's
Nobody
sharp,
ever
baby.
know you never watched it.
Rocking it. And the thing is, the great thing about that thing was that you only had to wash it half as much because, if one side got dirty, you just flip that sucker inside out.
And I had to look it up. It was killing me, and you could kick yourself because this is so simple. You know who that fullback was?
Who was it?
Lorenzo Neal.
Ah, yeah, that's how I could not think of his name.
As soon as the L popped up, I said, Lorenzo Neal. How in the world did I ever forget that? But, yeah, I mean,
he was a beast.
Just to mention the Hall, I mean, he filled right in very well for a very great fullback.
He, from his blocking, should be in the Hall of Fame. That's my opinion. Okay, we're going to have to take a quick break. Okay, let's get back into it. I'm going to read one off real quick, and then we're going to get into Art Donovan. Let's go and I'm going to go ahead and run down Yogi Berra one time. You can't do one of these shows without doing Yogi Berra. I mean, come on.
Yeah, you got to mention Yogi.
I mean, come on, it's Yogi. Lord knows the whole world misses old Yogi right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would love to hear.
What would I would just love to hear what he would say right now. I want to hear one of them Yogi-isms right now.
I bet you he would have had a humdinger for the election. There's no telling what he would have said.
I could do a whole hour on what we think he would say.
Yogi Berra was one of thousands of men who played a role in the D-Day invasion. Legendary New York Yankees catcher Yogi Berra was serving as a gunner's mate while stationed off the coast of Normandy Beach on a U.S. Navy boat that day. Just over a year later, he made his major league debut with the New York Yankees at age 18. So he was 17 years old over in Normandy. Can you imagine me, a 17-year-old kid over there with all the bullets flying? I mean, just terrified. I can just only imagine. Berra was a 10-time World Series champion. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it, Jordan. 10-time champion. A 15-time All-Star and an AL MVP 3 times. He also elevated his name into consideration as possibly the greatest catcher ever. And I'll be honest with you, and by the way, he also happened to win 3 World Series titles as a coach. So he's got 13 World Championships. Is that it? Is that all you got? Are you not entertained?
You remember when LeBron said he was going down to Miami, they were going to win not 1, not 2, not 3. Can you imagine Yogi sitting there? He's like, yeah, buddy. Not 8, not 9, not 10, but 13.
Yeah. And mine are real titles. They're called World Series champions.
I mean, I think he's the greatest catcher of all time. I know I covered him on our last show, and Yogi Berra, man, just not even just the athlete of him, but just the person. From what he did as a veteran, as a player, as a coach, as a mentor, and I mean, even up until his death, I mean, you went to Yogi for wisdom. He had those little one-liners, and they were just so simple that they were just genius. And I mean, some of them, I can't come up with any of them off the top of my head right now just because I'm sitting here trying to think of them. But Yogi Berra was the king of that, and I miss him. I wish we had him right now.
Well, I know one of my favorite Yogi-isms. I can remember he was talking about how busy Manhattan was. And they were asking him about something about if he was going to go somewhere in Manhattan, something, and I don't remember if it was a play or whatever. And he was talking about how busy it was, and how hard it was to get a table at this restaurant or whatever it was. And his Yogi, is one of his famous ones, was, well, nobody ever goes there anymore. It's too crowded. If you just think about it, and those are the typical Yogi-isms where they're like double entendres. I mean, they're just funny. I mean, he's the one that coined "It ain't over till it's over." Now, no one thinks about that being funny now, but that at the time when he coined that phrase 70, 80 years ago, I mean, that was a funny statement. People were laughing, "Oh, it ain't over till it's over." Well, then when is it over? But now it all makes sense to us because it's been said so many times. Now that's a typical thing a sportscaster does in a game when it's a 2-run deficit going into the bottom of the 8th, and they're about to bring in one of their better relievers to keep you locked in. They're going to say it ain't over till it's over. No one laughs about it now, but at the time it was pretty funny stuff.
I just got a quick list of some of them, and obviously it ain't over till it's over. Baseball is 90% mental. The other half is physical. That one's always cracked me up. You can observe a lot by watching. If the world were perfect, it wouldn't be. I like this one about the effect of the sun in left field in the old Yankee Stadium during late season games. it gets late early out there.
Yeah, I was trying to. I thought of that one, but I couldn't remember what he was referring to. I was thinking he was thinking it was like the time change. But yeah, I do remember that one.
This one came from when he was coaching. We made too many wrong mistakes. I mean, just simple ones like that, or during his press conferences. I wish I had an answer to that because I'm tired of answering that question. Yeah. Oh, Yogi Berra. Gotta love him.
Yeah, he's definitely in the conversation as the top 2 catchers of all time. I still think Johnny Bench is the greatest catcher of all time. But what Yogi did, you can't argue because the simple fact is the 13 championships. So if you're going to measure it by that, sure. But then again, he was on the New York Yankees in the 50s and 60s. One of the greatest dynasties of all time. I mean, he was playing with Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Whitey Ford.
That helps.
Yeah. That doesn't suck.
I'll take either one of them in an argument. At least that's who the argument has to be. I mean, I'll listen to either side of that argument. Bench was a great player in his own right. I think that's an understatement. Well, let's move into Art Donovan.
Let's do it. I'll tell you what, that was another funny guy, too, Art Donovan. But anyways, go ahead.
Arthur James, the Bulldog Donovan. Art Donovan was born June 5th, 1924, and was the son of Arthur Donovan Sr., a boxing referee, and the grandson of Professor Mike Donovan, the world middleweight boxing champion of the 1870s. Art attended Mount St. Mary Michael Academy in the Bronx. He received scholarship to the University of Notre Dame in 1942, but left after one semester to join the United States Marine Corps, enlisting of April of 43. He served 4 years to include service in the Pacific Theater during World War II. He took part in some of the conflict's fiercest engagements, such as the Battle of Luzon and the Battle of Iwo Jima. He also served as an ammo loader on a 40-millimeter gun on the aircraft carrier USS San Jacinto and as a member of the 3rd Marine Division. He earned citations which included the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal and the Philippine Liberation Medal, and would later earn him a place in the U.S. Marine Corps Sports Hall of Fame. He was the first pro football player with that honor. After the war, he completed his college career at Boston College. In each of his first 3 seasons, Donovan played for an NFL team which went out of business. He started with the first Baltimore Colts, who folded after his rookie season in 1950, followed by the New York Yanks in 51 and their successor, the Dallas Texans, in 52. After the Texans franchise was moved to Baltimore in 53 and became the second Baltimore Colts, Donovan played with that team. He became one of the stars in an outstanding defense and was selected to 5 straight Pro Bowls from 53 through 57. The Colts won back-to-back championships in 58 and 59. He was selected to the Man, I cannot speak tonight. Sorry, guys. Sorry, dude. He was selected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1968. During his career, Donovan played in what many believe was one of the most important games in the NFL history, the 1958 title game between the Colts and the Giants. The contest between the two teams took place December 28, 1958, and ended in a 17-17 tie. Because it was a championship game, it went into overtime, the first NFL game to do so. Donovan made an important tackle during the overtime, stopping the Giants and allowing Johnny Unitas to lead the Colts on an 80-yard scoring drive to win the game. What a career just to be able to play with Johnny Unitas. But to go into college, get drafted, to go into battle, fight at Iwo Jima, I mean, I know for everybody that's big, but for the Marines to be there at Iwo Jima and then come back. And
I mean, what a lot of people probably don't understand is because, unless you're a historian of the game, the Baltimore Colts that Art Donovan played on, they were all-time greats. I mean, they were big time.
He was one of 12 Hall of Fame players to take part in that game. 6 of them were Colts.
Still considered the
There's
greatest
Yogi
game
Berra.
ever played.
Yeah.
There's famous pictures of that game. What I remember the most about Art Donovan growing up is not only was he in all the Miller Lite commercials, the less filling tastes great commercials, but then later on he was constantly in NFL films. If you watch any NFL film that was made in the 80s, early 90s, he was being interviewed in them. And I mean, he was an absolute riot. I was hoping I could find some of those quotes here, but what I ran into has nothing to do with that. I mean, there's a couple of cute ones here, but I remember him being much funnier. There was one says, I went to college to play football, not to study it. I never met a cold cut I didn't like. This is just random. I don't eat vegetables. I only eat real food like cheeseburgers, Spam, hot dogs, and pizza. Spam's thrown in there. That's dated. But yeah, I just remember Art Donovan just being an absolute riot and just a joy to when you saw him appear in one of these NFL films or whatnot on TV. The room just immediately lit up, and though I've never met the man, he just seemed like he was an absolute joy to be around.
Oh, I didn't get that privilege. I didn't get to see any of his career. Just growing up and watching old NFL games and learning the history of the game, I learned about Art Donovan. But one of the quotes at his funeral that I thought was really hilarious was Raymond Berry, his former NFL teammate, was asking him about the war, and talking to him and wanting to know about it. And he just looked at him frankly and said, Raymond, I got shot in the ass at Iwo Jima. That's what happened. I mean, and just into that. I mean, you're not going to mess with the big defensive tackle.
All right, here's a funny one I came across with him. The best way to die is to sit under a tree, eat lots of bologna and salami, drink a case of beer, and then blow up. It's so random.
Oh, yes, it is.
Oh, man. But I just remember him. I just he had such a great delivery. I just saw one of his quotes, and this is typical. Probably because I'm thinking someone had asked him how he was so funny or whatnot. And where's the quote at? It says, I guess telling stories is an art form. I never looked at it that way. I just started talking. Everyone started laughing. So I've been talking, and they've been laughing ever since. and that's typical Art Donovan Bronx humor. I mean, he's just down to earth guy. I remember he used to pop up on Johnny Carson's show all the time in the 80s. And unfortunately, we don't have great late night talk show anymore. Late night talk shows anymore. We're stuck with what we have now. Those guys can't hold a candle to what Johnny Carson was doing, and then of course Dave Letterman has also retired. But Art Donovan, man, when you saw him pop up on Johnny Carson's show, you would stay up late just to watch him, because he wouldn't even be talking about football. He would be talking about everything else under the sun, but he would just be a riot, and he would have Johnny Carson over there in stitches, just leaning up underneath his desk because he was laughing so hard. But anyways, let's get into a few more of these before we have to switch gears. Here's one right here. Roberto Clemente competed in winter ball from 58 to 59. Clemente decided to choose a different path. He joined the United States Marine Corps Reserves. In addition to playing major leagues, Clemente also continued his reserve service until 1964. The outfielder had an 18-year professional baseball career, winning 2 World Series, 12 Gold Gloves, 12 All-Star selections. A lot of people still consider him one of the greatest players of all time. Clemente's plane went down in Nicaragua while he was doing a humanitarian mission in 1972, delivering aids to earthquake victims. The 5-year waiting period was waived for Clemente, and he was elected into the Hall of Fame the very next year. So if you're not familiar with who Roberto Clemente is, you might want to do a little more reading on him because he is an all-timer. Here's another one we got here. Bob Feller. Just 2 days after Pearl Harbor was attacked, the Cleveland Indians pitcher Bob Feller became the first Major League Baseball player to volunteer for active duty in World War II. Just 2 days. I realized at the time Bob Feller was Clayton Kershaw. After spending 4 years dedicated to the war effort, anti-guncraft captain on the battleship USS Alabama, famous warship, and earning 5 campaign ribbons and 8 battle stars, he returned to baseball. When he retired in 1956, after an 18-year professional career, Feller was a World Series champion. Remember, he was on the last Cleveland Indian World Series championship team. An 8-time All-Star, and had earned the baseball's Triple Crown. He won 266 games and struck out 2,600 batters, pitched 3 no-hitters in his career. In 1962, Bob Feller was inducted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. Tell us about Joe DiMaggio.
Man, where do you want me to start with Joe? Here we go. 13-time All-Star, 9 times World Series champion, 3-time AL MVP, 2-time AL batting champion, 2-time AL home run leader, 2-time AL RBI leader, MLB record 56-game hitting streak, MLB All-Century team. Joseph Paul Joe DiMaggio, nicknamed Joltin' Joe and the Yankee Clipper. He played his entire 13-year career for the New York Yankees and is perhaps best known for his 56-game hitting streak. DiMaggio was a 3-time MVP winner and an All-Star in each of his 13 seasons. At the time of his retirement, he ranked 5th in career home runs, 361, and 6th in career slugging percentage at 579. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1955 and was voted the sport's greatest living player in a poll taken during the baseball centennial year of 69. His brothers Vince and Dom were also major league center fielders. You know, the great thing about him was he got founded by his brother, who was out in the, I don't have the team right in front of me, but they were playing out in the Pacific Coast League in
San
the minors.
Francisco.
Yeah, and he's like, hey, my brother here can come in and field shortstop, and ended up getting it in and actually had a 61-game hit streak in the PCL, which is a record in itself.
Yeah.
He
Yeah, well, I mean, not
they-
only did he have the 56-game hit streak, he then missed a game and then went on for 13 more games out of that. So that was, 69 out of 70 games he had a base hit?
Yeah, and during that streak, he actually, even though he didn't get a hit in 57, he got a walk. He had 74 consecutive games where he got on base.
Realize
I mean, that
was the summer to be a baseball fan. That was the same season, the same summer that Ted Williams hit 406. It's the same exact season.
Listen to this stat. During DiMaggio's 56 games, he batted .408, walked 21 times, and whiffed just 5 times. He reached base via hit or walk 112 times. Ted Williams was even more impressive. During those same 56 games, Williams played in 55, batted .412, reached base 127 times, 50 times via walk. How could you not love that as a fan? I mean, you're watching a streak of 2 players going .408 and .412 during 56. I mean, essentially a third of the season. Well, I don't know. Did they? I don't have that. I shouldn't have said that. Did they still play 150 plus games
It was
back
154 back then.
So still the same. He only struck out
154.
13 times the whole season. Only struck out 369
They didn't go to
times in
160.
his career.
They didn't go to 162 until 1961. But anyways.
Yeah, so a third of the season, you're watching 2 of arguably, I mean, and if it wasn't for DiMaggio, if it wasn't for Williams,
That entire
DiMaggio,
summer was engulfed by people watching DiMaggio's streak and then, of course, the chase to 400. I mean, it was
Yeah.
it was arguably one of the greatest summers in baseball history. We are running out of time. So, real quick, Jack Loomis, I do want to get him in. We haven't done him before. After playing 9 games for the New York Giants as a rookie Loomis enlisted with the Marine Corps in 1942, the first wave of troops to land at Iwo Jima. He and his platoon remained on the island till the initial day of the battle. He was in Company E. Loomis helped knock out 3 enemy strongholds despite suffering injuries from great grenade shrapnel before being mortally wounded by a landmine. Before dying, Jack Loomis famously looked at the field doctor and said, "Well, Doc, tell the New York Giants they lost one hell of a defensive end today." Loomis died instantly and was awarded the Medal of Honor.
Wow.
Okay, I think that's as good as anywhere to end. We do want to thank our veterans. Make sure to go out and thank your veterans as well this weekend. Buy them a beer. Do something for them. So, Justin, with no further ado, what we do here, y'all, is we grab a handful of names and we kind of let people know what they did in case you didn't know what they did. You probably heard these people's names. You may not have watched them play. They might have been before your time, but you've probably heard their names in sport, and you're like, okay, that's great. They were a good player, but did you know they were a great American? And that's what we're focusing on today. Justin, what you got?
I'm going to discuss Bob Feller. Found an interesting article, military.com. Section's called Answering the Call, and it's where men and women who served in the military and then went back home to civilian careers talk about their days in uniforms. And the columnist is actually Bob Feller himself. So he was a legendary pitcher from the Cleveland Indians who interrupted his career in the majors to enlist in the Navy at the start of World War II. As Navy Chief Petty Officer Robert Feller, he participated in some of the best-known sea battles in the Pacific. When the war was over, he returned to the mound and resumed a straight shot to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Here's his account in his words of what his military service meant to him. I have never had to strain my memory to recall the day I decided to join the Navy. It was 7 December 1941. I was driving from my home in Van Meter, Iowa to Chicago to discuss my next contract with the Cleveland Indians, and I heard over the car radio that the Japanese had just bombed Pearl Harbor. I was angry as hell. I'd spent almost 6 full seasons in the major leagues by then, with a record of 107 victories and 54 losses, and I had a family-related draft exemption, but I knew right then that I had to answer the call. I arrived in Chicago late that afternoon to meet Cy Slapnicka, the Indians general manager, who had come there to talk about my contract for 1942. And I told him about my decision. I then phoned Gene Tunney, the former world heavyweight boxing champion and an old friend. A commander, Gene was in charge of the Navy's physical training program. He flew out from Washington and swore me in on Tuesday, 9th of December. After my basic training, The Navy made me a chief petty officer and assigned me as a physical training instructor. It was valuable in its way, but I wanted to go into combat. I had a lot of experience with guns as a kid, so I applied for gunnery school and sea duty. After 4 months of naval gunnery school in Newport, Rhode Island, I was assigned to a battleship, the USS Alabama, as a gun captain on a 40-millimeter aircraft mount that had a crew of 24. He went on to action in the North Atlantic and discusses that, and he says he got exactly what he wanted. The Alabama spent 6 months escorting convoys in the North Atlantic, and then in August 1943 went through the Panama Canal and headed for the Central Pacific. Over the next 2 years, we saw action in Tarawa, the Marshalls, and the Carolines, and the Philippines. We bombarded beaches to support amphibious assaults, served as escorts for aircraft carriers, and fended off kamikaze attacks. 2 enemy bombs hit the ship during the Marianas turkey shoot, and we survived a typhoon that pummeled us with 80-knot gusts off the Philippines coast. The Alabama never lost a man to enemy action. The people we had on the gun crews were very good shots. In 1945, I was sent to Great Lakes Naval Training Center and managed a baseball team there. In the 3rd week of August, just 15 days after the U.S. dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, I went on inactive duty. I was back to baseball after that. I rejoined the Indians on the 23rd of August and pitched 8 games. He won 5 and lost 3. Serving in the military is almost always a defining moment for any young man or woman. You're young and impressionable. You meet a lot of new people and you travel to new places and you learn to be on time, how to follow, and eventually how to lead. You never forget combat, but it makes a difference when you go through a war. No matter which branch of the service you're in, combat is an experience that you never forget. A war teaches you that baseball is only a game. After all, a minor thing compared to the sovereignty and security of the United States. I once told a newspaper reporter that the bombing attack we lived through on the Alabama had been the most exciting 13 hours of my life. After that, I said the pinstripe perils of Yankee Stadium seemed trivial. That's still true today. Now, my folks, is Bob Fellers. We had broke him down in the past, and I just really wanted to go in when I found his words. Nothing hit more true to me that my man just said, hey, I got to answer the call, and by golly, he did it. So we salute you, Mr. Feller.
And I don't think this generation, even our generation, understand that Bob Feller was one of the greatest pitchers of all time. Like, no one ever really references him as that because he played for some Indian teams that weren't very good. But you go back and look at the statistics alone, Bob Feller was a damn lights out pitcher, and it's unbelievable how many. Do you think today's age, and I'm not going to give anyone specific because it would not be fair, but do you think today's day and age we would have many of our elite athletes going over into war? I have my doubts. You talk about the ultimate privilege. Your elite athlete, whether it's NBA or whatever sport, I think we would be hard pressed to find anyone that would give up their millions. And I think we have a few people in our head that were like, I know that guy wouldn't. But what they did and they sacrificed, and some of them lost all. There are many that came back, and there are many that did not come back. And we've talked about that in great length in previous shows. We're just trying to shed the light again.
I want to make sure I had the number right. I don't mean to cut you off, but just to the quality of pitcher he was, 279 complete games. Get you some of that. You'll never see that done again.
Right, which is unheard of nowadays.
I mean, you'll be lucky to see 2 or 3 complete games in a man's career.
Right. It's only been 10 years ago that you hope to get a handful at the very most complete games in a season, right? Now, you might see an elite pitcher get 2 a year, and one of them is going to be because he's trying to make a run at a no-hitter. But nowadays, even I know it's a bad example, but he popped in my head. It's a bad example because he's injured, won't play next year. But you won't see a Justin Verlander type do that nowadays because they'll go out there and they'll pull him in the 5th or 6th inning, 7th inning. It's a shame because you don't get to watch what baseball was intended to be, which is mano a mano, and it was really about the starting pitcher going up against every batter and proving I'm better than you.
So we're never going to get a Bob Gibson again. We're never going to get unless something changes, and things do change. So you never know; it might go back to the other way. But the only way it changes is they somehow reduce the hell out of the roster. Because as long as you've got 8 guys in your bullpen, which is what it's going to go to for now on next year, you almost feel like you have to pull a guy because you're like, I can't sit him on the bench. I mean, I can't have him on the bench sit there for several days in a row. He'll get rusty. All right, mine is going to that we're going over right now is Justin just did Bob Feller. I'm gonna go back and do one of my favorites, the great Yogi Berra. He played 19 seasons in Major League Baseball, and all but the last for the New York Yankees. So he was an 18-time All-Star. So keep this in mind. Won 10 World Championships. 10. That's real cute. Those real cute memes you make about Michael Jordan being so great. 10. That's asinine. It means if you combine,
It means he's out of fingers.
it means it means if you combine LeBron James and Michael Jordan, you get into the Yogi Berra stratosphere. Unbelievable. And as a catcher too, guys, it's not like he was a shortstop or a second baseman that played all these years and won 10 championships on great teams. He was the game. He called the game, and then your knees, right? Okay, so he had a batting average 285 while hitting 358 home runs, which was a lot back then. Had 1,500 RBIs almost. He is one of only 5 players to win the AL MVP 3 times. He's widely regarded as the greatest catcher in baseball history in the American League, where others would argue it's Johnny Bench in the National League, and then the argument begins. But regardless, he's the greatest American League pitcher, and there is no argument before. It's Berra and Bench, and then, okay, everything else. But during World War II, Berra served in the U.S. Navy as a gunner's mate, and he was on the attack transport of the USS Bayfield during the D-Day invasion. So we always hear about the D-Day invasion. We always celebrate it in June. That man was there. He was on the beach, and it was his job to go back and forth bringing troops from the ship to the land. And his main job was to fight off any kind of attack. So he was a sitting duck, essentially. One of the reasons why he was, I remember reading this years back, one of the reasons why they picked him was because of his small stature. Everyone always hears Yogi Berra, and I think what everyone comes to is the Yogi-isms, right? But Yogi was a small guy. I think he was 5'8", 5'9", and a major league catcher, which is just, that's unheard of, because most of those guys most of your major league catchers are big guys, because they had to take, back then they actually protected home plate. I know you're not allowed to do that anymore, but back then you protected home plate or you didn't have a job. And so you got to talk about a guy who's a strong, muscular guy, and that's one of the reasons why they made him a gunner's mate on the USS Bayfield for the D-Day invasion. A second-class seaman, Berra was one of 6-man crew on a Navy rocket ship, firing machine guns and launching rockets at the German army on Omaha Beach. He was fired upon but not hit several times, and later received several commendations for his bravery. During an interview on the 65th anniversary, Berra confirmed that he was sent to Utah Beach during the invasion as well. So he was on both of the main beaches in the one of the most. I don't know if there's a bigger invasion in U.S. history, the D-Day invasion, that basically turned the war, and that's that's Yogi Berra for you. And then also Yogi Berra. Want to make sure I have this right. He got the Presidential Medal of Honor. I believe it was in 2015. I think
think he was nominated in 2013, and then he received it in 2015, and was in the Navy from 43 to 45. So got the Purple Heart, and I'm probably leaving stuff out, but that's the great Yogi Berra for you. And pretty much one of my favorite athletes of all time. I think we got Sean coming in on the show, so this is probably a good time to take a quick break. When we come back, Sean O'Toole will join us, and we will continue on with the Armchair Quarterbacks Salute to Service. We'll be back in a flash here on the Armchair Quarterbacks. Keep it locked in. Teamus Wooten is on his way back to the United States, so hopefully he. I'm hoping somehow he's actually going to make it into. He was. Well, I can't tell you everything he was saying, but he was complaining to me. That'll be the nicest thing I will say, as he was trying to catch a connecting flight in a ill part of the world. That's the nicest way I can put that. As I was asking him if he could. It was during the yesterday when the Boston Red Sox were reintroducing Alex Cora as their manager, excuse me, and I was asking him if he could get anywhere close to MLB Network TV, because I didn't know if he was. I knew he was coming back sometime in this area, but I didn't know exactly when. And I told him, if he didn't catch you, you'd probably be on YouTube, and if I do see the actual video, I'll share it to the Armchair page so it's easier for him to find. But in the middle of that, he said, "Yeah, I'm gonna try to catch that on YouTube sometime because I'm in," and then the rest is bleep, 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 bleep. Fair enough, man. Just get the hell out of there and get back.
Teamus is coming back, and Alex Core. Collusion.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to be back. God, I think he's been gone. It seems like March-ish, I think, is when he left. It was before baseball, and it was before the pandemic hit. So it was right around February or March. And because the moment that pandemic shut everything down, I accused him of running to go hide in some kind of war, so he didn't have to deal with this over here. Anyways, joining us to the show, Mr. Sean O'Toole. Sean, how are you, sir?
I'm fantastic. Happy Veterans Day to everyone. And, please, if you know anyone in your life that served, I do know a lot of people in my own family and outside of it. I do actually have friends, not many of them, but most of them are veterans. So make sure to thank a veteran today. Do what you can, regardless of what it is. Everything means something to the folks that serve this country.
listening to Braves Country Baseball's Salute to Service Special, a compilation from our Armchair Quarterback radio show, which aired for 8 years on CBS Sports affiliates before changing to Braves Country. It's a compilation of shows that are going over some of our more famous athletes who served our country as well. And thank you for your service.
He's the armchair quarterback. He's full of beer and he's full of snacks. The all-American man with a cool one in his head.
Well, unlike Bob Feller, they both had their careers. Let me rephrase that. Both had their careers interrupted by World War II. But unlike Feller, who was already famous when he went in, Spahn achieved his notoriety primarily after the war. He had a small call-up and had only had a brief appearance, which was 4 games in 1942 before he started his career. Most of his Hall of Fame career was with the Boston Milwaukee Braves. Warren Spahn won 363 games, ranking 6th overall, the most for a left-handed pitcher. A 17-time All-Star, Spahn's career included 13 seasons with 20 or more wins, 3 ERA titles, 2 no-hitters, notably at age 39 and 40, and a World Series championship and Cy Young award, both won in 1957. As I alluded to yesterday, one of his career highlights also includes something we'll never, ever see again, and that was an epic 16-inning pitching duel on July 2nd, 1963 at age 42 against Juan Marichal. That's amazing. But Spahn entered the Army on December 3rd, 1942 at Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, which was a combination training facility and a POW camp. Following basic training, he was sent to Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, where he was assigned the 276 Engineer Combat Battalion. He continued to play baseball and helped pitch the battalion's team to the post championship. On November 4th, 1944, Staff Sergeant Spahn and his unit, part of the 1159th Engineer Combat Group, boarded the Queen Mary for France. Of the men in the unit, Spahn later said some had been let out of prison if they would commit to enlist. So these are the people I went overseas with, and they were tough and rough, and I had to learn to fit that mold. Spahn soon found himself in the middle of action in the brutal Battle of the Hurtgen Forest and the Battle of the Bulge. Spahn recalled being surrounded and his men having to fight their way out. During one of the coldest winters on record, Spahn said, "Our feet were frozen when we went to sleep, and they were frozen when we woke up. We didn't have a bath or change of clothes for weeks." In March 1945, the 276 was at Ramingen, Germany, working around the clock to repair the Ludendorff Bridge. Suddenly, everyone heard what they thought were rifle shots, but it was rivets being sheared off from the trusses and beams. The bridge, weakened by demolitions and heavy troop and vehicle traffic and the vibrations from artillery fire and construction equipment, was collapsing. A total of 28 men were killed or missing and 65 wounded. 18 men were rescued from the river. Spahn was among the wounded, getting hit in the left foot by a piece of bridge shrapnel. The 276 received the Presidential Unit Citation for its actions, and Spahn was also awarded the Purple Heart. In addition, Spahn received a battlefield commission, which lengthened his service by another 6 months. Discharged in April of 1946, he returned to the Boston Braves in time to post an 8-5 season. A lot of historians and fans have claimed that Spahn's 4 years in the Army cost him the chance of reaching 400 wins. But Spahn disagrees, and here are his comments on that. "I matured a lot in those years. If I had not had that maturity, I would not have pitched until I was 45. Elaborating to that, he goes on to say, "After what I went through overseas, I never thought of anything I was told to do in baseball as hard work. You get over feeling like that when you spend days on end sleeping in frozen tank tracks in enemy-threatened territories." Warren Spahn retired in 1965, and in 1973, he was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. That is Warren Spahn, gentlemen. And he had a sweet leg kick.
Yeah,
probably learned that over there.
Every time I think of Warren Spahn, past his bravery and whatnot. First of all, arguably one of the greatest pitchers of all time.
but he was the old saying, if anyone's ever heard it, spawn and sane and pray for rain. Back then, the Braves, but this before they were in Atlanta, this was in the Milwaukee days, they had two really elite pitchers, and then the rest of their pitching staff was garbage. It was Warren Spahn. I want to say it's Johnny Sane, but I always forget his first name. But anyways, that's where the term comes, spawn and sane and pray for rain, because you're hoping for a bunch of rain out so it can get back to them. Back then, you usually had a 3 to 4 man pitching staff, so that's where that comes from. Great job, Justin. What's your walk-off, sir?
Again, just want to say thank you to all our veterans, past and present, all you men and women that have had ultimate sacrifices for us and continue to do so every day. Thank you.
All right. Well, kids, gather around. This isn't a name you hear a lot, but it's one I think you probably should. It means a lot to me personally. I'll mention why towards the end. Hank Greenberg played 12 of his 13 major league seasons for the Detroit Tigers, who are, my favorite team, having grown up in Michigan. He was an American League All-Star 4 times. He was also a 2-time American League MVP as a first baseman in 1935 and as a left fielder in 1940. He had a batting average over 308 seasons, won 2 World Series with the Tigers in 1935, 1945. And hit a whopping 58 home runs in 1938, which, there's not a lot you can find on video from that time, but you can read about it. 58 home runs in 1938 is like 120 now. It was nuts. I mean, the ball was completely made differently back then. There weren't lights in most outdoor stadiums. There's a very famous Hank Greenberg axiom in the 1935 World Series, because St. Louis's Sportsman Park didn't have lights, and game 3 went into the bottom of the 9th, and it was getting dark, and Hank Greenberg hit what was a walk-off grand slam, and the umpire said, "Hank, I can't call the game. I didn't see where the ball went." Hank turned around and said, "Well, I saw it just fine. This game's over." which is one of my favorite little Hank Greenberg anecdotes. I'll get to the military service, and then I'll round back around to just some career numbers on him, because his career numbers are nuts. And honestly, he should be someone that's just more highly regarded. He was kind of unfortunately and unfairly, not only lost 4 years of his prime to military service, but also was sandwiched directly between kind of Babe Ruth and Ted Williams, and was really forgotten about as kind of like the Larry Holmes of baseball, because he just came between, 2 monoliths in baseball history. But in October of 1940, Greenberg was the first American League player to register for the nation's peacetime draft. And in 1941, the Detroit Draft Board originally classified him as 4F, which is for flat feet, meaning he wouldn't be eligible for military service. He appealed. There was a lot of public sentiment in the early 1940s as a war was brewing overseas, that a lot of athletes might try to get out of service, which famously Jack Dempsey did during World War I, and took a lot of public criticism for it after the fact. Most baseball players didn't feel that way and wanted to serve their country, and Hank was no exception. On May 7th, 1941, he was inducted into the U.S. Army after playing 19 games in left field. He reported to Fort Custer in Battle Creek, Michigan, which is about 20 minutes from my hometown of Mount Morris. He made a comment that, "I made up my mind to go when I was called. My country comes first." A lot of players were bitter about the lower amount of pay that they were given compared to their Major League Baseball salary. That was a big, talking point in newspapers at the time. And Hank was a model citizen. He was an anti-tank gunner. He was promoted to sergeant and was honorably discharged from active service on December 5th, which was 2 days before Japan actually bombed Pearl Harbor. So he re-enlisted as a sergeant on February 1st, 1942, volunteered for service in the Army Air Forces, and served until late 1944. He served a total of 47 months, the longest of any Major League Baseball player by far in the prime of his career. He played 19 games in the 1941 season, lost all of 42, 43, and 44, and didn't return to play baseball again until June 14th of 1945. That is Henry Greenberg's service to the U.S. military. 2-time MVP, 10-time All-Star, just an amazing battery of statistical references. His career WAR is 54.2, which is by 1938, 1940 standards, really only trails like Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, right? He's basically the sixth greatest hitter. He's even higher than Jimmy Fox in lifetime WAR.
And it's funny because he's so underrated as a player. I mean,
so underrated.
You never hear it talk about, but like you said, what was the year that he hit 58 home runs? 1930. Was it 30?
The 58 home runs was the 1938 season where he actually finished third. Yeah, 38. 58 home runs, 119 runs batted in, which is just nuts. Batted 315, 438 on base, 683 slugging, 1122 OPS. His OPS, I'm going to read off his OPS, which is a modern, analytical measurement that people use. These are his OPSs from 1934 to 1940.
Okay.
1,005, 1039, 1085, 1105, 1122, 1042, 1103. His 1940 season, which is his second MVP, he was 340, 41 home runs, 150 runs batted in, 50 doubles, 8 triples, 6 stolen bases, 93 walks. I mean, he is such an underrated player. Even by Tigers fans, he's considered probably the second greatest Tiger of all time behind Al Kaline, and the statistics don't back that up. He's a far superior player to Al Kaline. Kaline just happened to be with the Tigers during the Tigers' greatest period of sustained success, which was the 60s and 70s, where they lost the American League pennant so many times to great Yankees teams. It's almost laughable. But he's, by most statistical measurements, the greatest Tiger to ever play. And even amongst Tigers fans, he's basically second. It's basically Al Kaline, Hank Greenberg, and then Alan Trammell. Anybody who was alive from 1930 to 1950, of which there's not a ton of people left, unfortunately. A lot of people like my father have passed on. My father always said Hank Greenberg was the best hitter he ever saw. Said he was just an amazing masher. And that is the guy who loved his nickname. It wouldn't be PC to call him this today, but he was known as the Hebrew Hammer. And he was an amazing baseball player. And like I said, just unfortunately kind of lost to history and lost to time, because he's right between Babe Ruth, played the same time as Ted Williams, and then DiMaggio and Mantle come along. Just an amazing player, an amazing Patriot, served his country dutifully. You just take his averages over his career and slot it into those 3 seasons that are completely lost, and even add the 41 season where he only played 20 games. I mean, he's easily one of the 10 best statistical players of all time. And he's one of the 30 best statistical players of all time. So that is Hank Greenberg. Thank you for your service to our country. And thank you for being a Detroit Tiger. Still love it.
Yeah, I don't think he gets enough love. There's a couple that I won't go over their entire thing, but I'll mention them at the end of the show, because we just don't have a long enough show to do all these athletes. But there are a lot of people. Do yourself a favor, America. Do a deep dive later on today, and there are a bunch of articles that have been written. Hell, I don't know how you would find mine, because mine was about 7 years ago, but that have been written about this very topic. How many athletes gave all, and some of them gave up their entire, not just their life. Some of them also gave up the prime years of their career. I know life is much more important, but I'm saying from a perspective of a sports, history, there's no telling what some of these guys would have been. Rocky Bleier is a great example. He got shrapnel in the leg and then continued off into a pretty darn good NFL career. But what would he have been if he hadn't been running around with shrapnel in his leg his entire career? So, that's, I don't think it's ever stated enough how important these guys are to the American landscape, because I think your average person thinks that a lot of these quote unquote athletes that served during wartime were like Elvis Presley. They're over there just singing songs and dancing around and making movies and whatnot. And there were some that got that, but a lot of them were right in the teeth of the fight. And
right.
That's what's always jumped out at me, is when I first started researching this years ago, I was like, man, I cannot believe that some of these guys gave what they gave. This got sparked by Justin and I talking about Pat Tillman one day. This is prior to Veterans Day of our first season back with the Armchair Quarterbacks in 2014. We talked about it on end for, 15, 20 minutes that day. And this was like a week or so before Veterans Day. And Justin and I called each other off air and basically said, why don't we do that for as many guys as we can find? And then you start opening the lid and you're like, man, I did not know there was this many guys. I'm going to do one of the basic ones because I think this has to always be appreciated, especially considering not only is this man considered possibly the greatest hitter of all time, he's also considered possibly one of the greatest pilots of all time in Mr. Ted Williams. Played 19-year career as a left fielder for the Boston Red Sox from 1939 to 1960, excuse me. The only thing that interrupted him was something called World War II and the Korean War. He served in both. January 42, after World War II began, Williams was drafted in the military, being put into Class 1A. Williams joined the Naval Reserve on May 22nd, went on to active duty in 43 and was commissioned second lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps as a naval aviator on May 2nd, 1944. Williams also was on the baseball team in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, along with other Red Sox teammates like Johnny Pesky, remember the Pesky pole, in pre-flight training. After 8 weeks in Amherst, Massachusetts, the civilian pilot training course while on the baseball team. So he was doing all this at once. I don't know why he was playing baseball and trying to learn how to fly, like he was going to forget how to play baseball, but that's Ted Williams for you. Williams was sent back to Fenway in 43 to play in an all-star game managed by Babe Ruth. And Williams, who people still talk about how, and I've heard this on many occasions, that he was possibly one of the greatest pilots of all time. And it all comes down to his eyesight, right? And that's his eyesight in reaction. And of course, that's what made him a great hitter. But this is a typical humbling quote by Ted Williams. He would always tell you how badass he was on a baseball field, but he was always very humble in his service. Quote, I was no hero. There were maybe 75 pilots in our two squadrons, and 99% of them did a hell of a lot better job than I ever did. But the numbers always came back as that's not true, Ted. Like you were elite. I won't rattle off all his combat statistics, but they are eye popping. He flew 39 missions and won a boat ton of medals. Some of those medals including 3 air medals for flight operations, Navy Union Commendation, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, American and Asian Pacific Campaign Medal, World War II Victory Medal, National Defense Service Medal, and oh, by the way, he's the last guy to hit 400 in Major League Baseball. Other than that, Ted Williams was kind of a disappointment of what he could have done with all his potential, right? I mean, this guy, and it's funny, and I can just imagine him in a cockpit, just a very determined guy. But remember his famous line that everyone always talks about is they said, what motivated you in the world of baseball? And he said, I wanted people to point at me walking down the street and goes, there's the best damn hitter that's ever lived. I would challenge people to find someone better. Because Ted Williams, to me, is probably the greatest overall hitter. When you talk about the power and the average, the greatest hitter of all time. He was the original shift. They shifted a little bit with Babe Ruth, but not a whole lot. It was unthought of in that day.
the original shift was called the Williams shift. And so there you go. There's Ted Williams for you. Incredible human being, incredible American, and arguably the best, if not the top 2 or 3 hitters of all time. And there you go. And then somehow they tried to freeze him, and we're going to bring him back. That's how good you know you're a badass when they decide they're going to try to freeze you, because they got to replicate your DNA. I don't think we're in any danger of that. Of them going, oh, we got to make sure these guys are around. You know, we got to duplicate old O'Toole and McGee. Don't want to lose these guys. Williams, they're like, oh man, we got to keep his head. Anyone that forgets that well, you know what? Let's just forget.
It's fun. It's funny that if the kids today, with all their Google machines, you know, in the pocket of their hands, go look for videos of Ted Williams, probably the first actual search, or the first 10 searches, is going to be him in the golf cart at Fenway Park that year, coming out with his just, you know, not to sully his name, but his son was a real piece of work, you know, trying to just hand out T-shirts for his company that he was trying to use his dad's name to right. tailgate off of. And I think,
but I'll always remember that night, because that was one of the coolest moments in sports, because yep. all those Major League Baseball players who are obviously all-stars, but a lot of them turned out to be Hall of Fame players.
Yeah.
Them being in awe and emotional, getting to meet him. And I remember some of the interviews yep. afterwards. Some of them did talk about this. When I first learned about it, essentially, I'd heard a little bit about, but this they talked about essentially what he had done for his country. And I was like, what? Ted Williams was in the war too? And I was like, whoa, Ted Williams wasn't just in the war; he was in the wars and kicked ass in both wars. Yeah, it's. I'll never forget Mark McGuire leaning over to hug him and being mm-hmm. all emotional, and of course Nomar was there, and you know, all of them. I don't want to leave anyone out, so I'll end the list at that. But they were all there back in '99. I've gone back and watched, you know, during the pandemic shutdown, I went back and watched the '99 All-Star game. It was a great All-Star game, first of all, but then that being added to it was just incredible.
That was the first time the Home Run Derby became appointment television, and I mean, it was that whole weekend at Fenway was a big deal. Mark McGuire at that point was, and we're not going to have the McGuire discussion and do the revisionist history on that, but at that point in time, Mark McGuire was the most popular player in baseball in decades, I would say. I mean, everybody was gobbling up Mark McGuire stuff. The Cardinals were on national TV all the time. That was a real moment. And for him to have been just awestruck by the sight of Ted Williams, much less meeting him, tells you a lot about how much he was revered by baseball players in the game. He was easily one of the most revered players of all time. And yeah, like you said, 70 years after he retired, you know, still nobody's had that kind of talent with their eyesight and hand-eye coordination as him. He's still regarded as probably the greatest hitter to ever live, even 70 years later, after most of the people that covered him have long since passed on. That tells you a lot about how great he truly was.
Yeah, that's also the infamous Pedro Martinez game where he struck out the side and whiffs the first 5 of 6 NL batters mm-hmm. and ends up being the MVP of the All-Star game. That was one of the greatest ones. I always forget the names. I'm not going to go back and cite them, but that's always put up against a similar All-Star game in the very beginning of the All-Stars, where a list of who's who, there was in other words, what Pedro Martinez did in '99 hadn't been done in about 60 years. That's the short of it. David Robinson. What you got on David Robinson today, sir?
Yep. Quick part as we go into the end of the show. Want to talk about the Admiral really quick. One of the real stand-up gentlemen in the history of the National Basketball Association. Widely considered the best basketball player in the history of the Naval Academy. Not that that's a high bar. But amazingly, he had an incredible career coming out of, the military and playing basketball, which is just not something that had happened before or since. Chose the number 50 after his idol, Ralph Sampson. Won the All-American Naismith and Wooden Awards as an Academy first-classman, which means a senior. In 1986, he led Navy, which was a number 7 seed, to within a game of the Final Four before falling to Duke in the East Regional Final. Played his first 3 years for the midshipmen under Paul Evans, and then his senior year under Pete Herman. Upon graduation, he was immediately eligible for the NBA draft, was drafted in 1987 by the San Antonio Spurs, but he still had 2 years of active duty obligation to fulfill with the Navy, so didn't actually play in the NBA until 1989. Some interesting service notes. He originally wanted to be an unrestricted line officer at sea, but he was unable to be that because he's 7'1". Don't know how many of our listeners or how many people have ever been in an actual naval ship, but that's a real challenge to be 7'1" in a naval ship. That's a problem.
You're not going to be a pilot either.
No, that is a real problem. So
you better learn how to play basketball. just put that out there.
He was actually a threat of being dishonorably discharged just because of his height, because they couldn't find a position for him. But as a compromise, the Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman at the time, allowed him to retrain and receive a commission as a staff officer in the Civil Engineer Corps. So he finished out his time as a civil engineering officer at Base Kings Bay in Georgia. He was regularly featured in recruiting materials for the Naval Service. And despite the nickname Admiral, which he was never actually an admiral, his actual rank upon fulfilling the service commitment was lieutenant junior grade. Started in basically what amounts to the 88-89 NBA season with the San Antonio Spurs. Just some overall, career highlights: 2-time NBA champion, 10 times All-NBA, the MVP in 94-95, which unfortunately, if you search for online, you're going to get a lot of results about how mad Akeem Olajuwon was about that. Akeem Olajuwon absolutely just humiliated him in the playoffs that year and really took it personally. And Akeem, by all accounts, is a nice guy, but I think they did not like each other very much and had a great rivalry for years and years. He was the 89-90 Rookie of the Year, the 91-92 Defensive Player of the Year, 8-time All-Defensive Player, like I said, 2-time NBA champion, 93-94 scoring champion, and is in the Hall of Fame. So that's David Maurice Robinson, also known as the Admiral. You can find him on Twitter at David the Admiral. Just an incredible story, an incredible player, and really ahead of his time. If he played in today's game, he'd be shooting 3-pointers.
And also something I think it's overlooked by him is he was a mathematics major and evidently is really, really sharp when it comes to the world of math. So had it been around when he retired, he might have went into the analytics world, right? Although analytics in basketball is just about the dumbest thing. But anyways, I'm sorry, dude. You can analytic all you want. I'm not going to be able to cover LeBron James. I'm just telling you, man. It's never going to happen, my friend. Never going to happen. My last one for today, I know we're running out of time, so I'll cut this pretty short, is Christy Mathewson. Most people... I'd say a lot of people probably don't know who he is, but he is looked upon as one of the greatest pitchers of the early part of the 20th century, nicknamed the Christian Gentleman. Late in the 1918 season, Mathewson enlisted in the U.S. Army for World War I. His wife, Jane, very much opposed the decision, but Mathewson insisted on enlisting. He served overseas as a captain in the newly formed Chemical Service, along with Ty Cobb. Everyone forgets that Ty Cobb was actually a war hero, but we won't talk about that today. We'll save that for a future show. But Ty Cobb actually was. Ty Cobb's not the terrible person that you've read in the headlines. There was a lot to Ty Cobb. When he arrived in France, talking about Mathewson, he was accidentally gassed during a chemical training exercise, and he ended up getting tuberculosis from this, and it infects his lungs. Mathewson served in the American Expeditionary Forces until February of 1919, when he was discharged because of the tuberculosis. He returned as a coach to the Giants from 1919 to 1921, could not pitch again. He spent a good portion of that time at Saranac Lake fighting tuberculosis. Mathewson would later on pass away just a few years later. Christy Mathewson Day is celebrated as a holiday in his hometown of Factoryville, Pennsylvania, on the Saturday closest to his birthday. And so there you have, he's one of my favorite stories, because the guy basically, he got hit with mustard gas in a training exercise.
Right.
And the guy pitched for the New York Baseball Giants for 17 years under their greats. That's when the New York Giants were at their peak. He was in the very first World Series, 373 total wins, 2,500 strikeouts, but in an era where you didn't strike people out. It was looked upon as a badge of honor to not strike out. So you didn't have, this guy struck out four times today, but he also hit a home run. People would say, you're a bum. Put the ball in play. And two-time World Series champion, two-time Triple Crown winner in pitching, the NL wins leader in 4 times, ERA leader 5 times, strikeout leader 5 times, pitched 2 no-hitters, and the only pitcher that is revered is probably better than him in his time period is the great Walter Johnson, the Train. But there are people who watched him play that say Christy Mathewson was a gamer, and that's the guy you wanted on the mound. Walter Johnson, although he had, what would he have, over 100 shutouts in his career, it was something ridiculous. Walter Johnson didn't step up in a lot of big moments. So that was kind of the back and forth back then. I've read a couple of books on this. Essentially, they say Christy Mathewson is a better version of Andy Pettitte, right? Solid regular season, but man, you didn't want to face him in October. And Matt and Walter Johnson might have been closer to what Greg Maddux was. Yeah, he got a World Series title, but usually he was terrible in the postseason. I think that's about it, sir. We've ran late, so I'm not going to do turn back time or the birthdays. What is your walk-off for the day?
Find someone in your life who's a veteran. Thank them for their service to our country. Remember what today is really about. This amazing, wonderful country that we're all fortunate to live in, the greatest country in the world. It's easy to forget about that, especially if you spend too much time on your phone and too much time on social media. It's easy to listen to the noise. It's hard to just stop and think that we do live in the greatest country in the world. And the reason we live in the greatest country in the world is because of the people who've made sacrifices for us. So find someone that's made that sacrifice, whether they pay the ultimate price or not, and give them thanks today, because that's what today is about.
I'm gonna start with Jerry Coleman. I just did a little deep, and as we've done these, try and dig a little deeper and find some names I haven't done in the past. And Coleman was interesting to me. He's the only Major League Baseball player to have seen combat in 2 wars. Jerry Coleman first postponed the start of his career to fly as a Marine aviator in World War II, and then left baseball to fly in the Korean War, in which he actually had a plane crash. He survived. In all, he flew 120 missions and was awarded 2 distinguished flying crosses and 13 air medals. The Colonel won 4 World Series champions, 46, 50, 51, and 56 as a second baseman with the New York Yankees. He went on to have a lengthy broadcasting career, earning an introduction into the broadcasters wing of the Baseball Hall of Fame in 05 and the Radio Hall of Fame in 07.
Yeah, we've done him in the past, and I'll tell you what, all these guys' stories, when you hear them, like, to me, it never gets old. We'll do this again on Memorial Day show, but those are the only 2 days that we really do this a year. And I don't know if people like it or not, but if you don't appreciate this, the only thing I can say is to hell with you, because Justin said it best at the top of the hour that you should be thanking a veteran every day. Every time you get a chance, anytime you realize that you're standing next to a veteran, and especially what we are referring to as the greatest generation, because they are leaving us, unfortunately. There's not a whole lot left, and what they did in World War II to basically salvage the way of life that we have today is you can't even put a price tag on it. World War I and World War II took the most out of the U.S. Now, that is not to put down any other war, okay? If anyone has ever been in any war or any combat mission or ever put in harm's way defending the United States, it's all equally dangerous. But when World War II took place, like, people have to realize it was not a foregone conclusion that the U.S. was going to come out victorious. There was a lot of fear that the empires of Japan and Germany and Italy were going to defeat the Allies. And so anytime that we get a chance, we go to that. And then, of course, don't you feel like sometimes World War I gets glossed over because of the World War II factor that we're closer to it? I don't think a lot of us have met people who fought in World War I, just because we're talking about something that took place. Actually, it would have still been going on about 100 years ago. It would have just ended, essentially. But I also think that because in the 1940s, we were also talking about the beginning of television, and also the easy and readiness that it was to broadcast those, the films that they would put into movie theaters, because people used to go to movie theaters by the droves. Every Saturday, it was a routine for most people, and the clips that they would show in the theaters prior to the movies was loaded up with film from abroad, basically keeping everyone abreast of what was going on.
Oh, our society's soft nowadays. They couldn't handle that world back then. Tell me if the draft happened, and there's no way people volunteer like you had during that generation. It's sad. It'd look like a migrant caravan leaving the U.S. If we had that again, unfortunately.
I hope that's not the case. I hope we would be surprised. I would hope that because I'm in an age now where I wouldn't be any good to anybody. I might mentally think.
Dude, I don't even think we're eligible at our age anymore.
Well, no, age and honest engine. I'm on the backside of 40, and I wouldn't call myself in shape. We'll just put that out there. So I don't I go in there trying to volunteer. Like, yeah, that's cute, man. Would you get out of the way for the guy that we can actually use?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to low crawl. They'd be like, dude, it still looks like you're standing up. That's just my belly.
All you're doing is just eating chow, man. Like, would you just go home? What do we have to do to make you think that you actually contributed? Can I get one of those neat little pins? Yes. All right, now go home. I would hope that if, and hopefully we never see it again. Hopefully,
yeah. Hopefully that's where I'm going with that. We never see that.
man, it was a different time, and that's why I want to thank these people each and every day, because I could only imagine if that happened today, the conundrum we would be in.
I'll tell you one of the things that I think would be an issue, though, is how many kids would sign up thinking it's going to be like a video game, right?
Yeah.
And then get over there and get a real awakening.
Wow.
That goes back into what I was talking about last week. I don't remember if you were on the show at the time or not, but I was talking about the history of college football. And one of the reasons why college football became as popular as it did in the late 19th century and going into the early 20th century is because they were coming out of wartime. They had not had a major war since the Civil War. And the fear was that the United States citizens, the young men, were going to become soft. And so they wanted something that would basically, and you can't compare football to war, but what they were trying to do is get kids involved in something where, A, there's teamwork, and B, that you have some kind of circumstances where you have to fight through to show mental toughness. And that was one of the reasons why college football got its popularity, because if people remember, or I'd say a lot of people don't know this, but when football started, it was only played in colleges, meaning there was no pro and there was no high school level. It was a game you picked up when you got to college, and that was the main reason for it, is that they never knew if we were going to get into another war around the corner, and they wanted these guys physically and mentally tougher. I don't know if you can say that actually helped, but it's the reasoning behind why all these universities in a sport where people were dying on the field, they allowed it. They wanted the game to continue because they felt like it was good for the country. And when I read that a few weeks ago, I mean, it gives you more of a, I don't know, it kind of gave me a lump in my throat on the very next college football game I watched. You know what I mean? Like you look at it and you're like, it's funny how stuff like that always comes back to the preservation of this great nation. I'm going to start off with Hobie Baker. He was the only athlete in history that has been named to both college football and the Hockey Hall of Fame. Hobie Baker, as they called him, led Princeton University to national championships in both sports, taking the football title in 1911, the hockey titles in 1912 and 1914. An award named in his honors presented now every year to the nation's top male U.S. college hockey player. With World War I underway, Baker enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1917 and was a trained pilot as the commander of the 103rd Air Squadron. As wartime went on, Baker survived, but then was killed just weeks later after he was trying to fly a test plane while still with the U.S. Army. And that's Hobie Baker.
I'm going to go to Al Bunbury. I did not realize this prior to his 13-year Major League Baseball career. Outfielder Al Bunbury led an infantry platoon in Vietnam. A Bronze Star recipient, he had the impressive distinction of bringing all of the soldiers who served under him home safely. Starting his professional career with the Orioles, Bunbury was voted the American League Rookie of the Year in 1973. He was also an All-Star in 1980 and won the World Series with Baltimore in 83. That was amazing to me, that an infantryman took all of his guys to Vietnam and brought them home safely. Kudos to Al Bunbury, and man, thank you.
I actually remember him playing too. And I knew nothing about that. I remember that first 83. That was one of the first World Series championships of my youth that I can remember. My very first one was 82 with the Cardinals over the Brewers, and 83 really stuck out to me because a lady that helped take care of us for quite a while, she was a huge Baltimore Orioles fan, and so we used to talk baseball all the time, and I did not want to see the Baltimore Orioles win, but I do remember him. I had no idea that because those are the type of things that I don't know if I was just too young because I didn't pay attention, or if they just didn't bring him up over the air. But I do not remember that. Of course, in '83 the Vietnam War was still pretty raw, so maybe it's something they didn't want to talk about much. I'm going to go with Jack Loomis. This is one of my favorite stories just because of the quote. After playing 9 games with the New York Giants as a rookie, Jack Loomis enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1942. In the first wave of troops to land on Iwo Jima in 1945, he and his platoon remained on the island after the initial day to continue the Battle of the Japanese. Loomis helped knock out 3 enemy strongholds despite suffering injuries of grenade shrapnel before being mortally wounded by a landmine. Before dying, he famously told the field doctor, "Well, Doc, the New York Giants lost a hell of a good defensive end today." Loomis was awarded the Medal of Honor. That was always one of my favorite ones, just because.
That's always one of mine as well.
For him to have that kind of whereabouts, because I'll tell you what, if I was in that same position, I don't know if I'd be coming up with catchy quotes. That's, of course, I don't know, a guy like that gave up what he gave up. And the ones that lose it to the landmines are always hit home to me, because we had a family friend that lost their life to a landmine, and I found that out at a very young age. Long story short, as a kid, man, I was kind of terrified of that, just of the fact that, not that I was ever in harm's way of hitting a landmine, but the sheer possibility that you're just walking around and boom, it's over, right? Anyways, moving on. What is your number 3, sir?
I'm gonna go Jim Longboard. I did not realize about this young man at the time when he did it, but in 1967, Jim Longboard became the first Cy Young Award winner in Boston Red Sox history. But what makes his 22-win, 246 strikeout season all the more impressive is that several times during the year he had to leave the team between starts to fulfill his duty as a member of the Army Reserves. Retiring in 1979, Longboard had a 57-37 record while serving. I just want to give a shout out to some of our reserves and guard members on Veterans Day as well. But that's impressive that in Cy Young. He wasn't having rest in between his starts. He was out there serving his country in the way that he could during that time, and that's still an impressive Cy Young season.
My final one for this hour, if you want to continue listening, make sure to download our app, the Armchair Quarterbacks app. Sean O'Toole will be joining us at the top of the hour. And if you missed the memo, we're going 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern for now on. I've had to change my work schedule, so it's the only way I could continue to do this. But anyways, Sean's going to bring some to the table as well. And this hour, I'll finish it off with the, I think probably everyone's favorite Yankee, Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra was one of thousands of men who played a role in the D-Day invasion. The legendary New York Yankees catcher Yogi Berra was serving as a gunner's mate while stationed just off the coast of Normandy Beach on a U.S. Navy boat. Just over a year later, he made his Major League debut with the New York Yankees. In his 18-year career, Berra was a 10-time World Series champion, 15-time All-Star, and AL MVP 3 times. He is widely known as the greatest, if not the second greatest behind Johnny Bench, catcher of all time. I always have contended it's Yogi Berra, but many people will tell you that it's Johnny Bench. He also won 3 World Series titles as a coach for the Mets and the New York Yankees. And he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame, in 1972. Yogi Berra was the guy that was running the boats to bring the soldiers to Normandy Beach, running back and forth. that may not sound like much, but you got to understand that his boat was under constant heavy artillery the entire time. And he's just running back and forth. As dangerous, if not more dangerous, than actually jumping on the beach itself, because once you got once you get past the first wave on Normandy Beach, you could set up shops, so to speak. Those boat gunner mates, man, they were just going back and forth through enemy fire for hours. I'd say it was probably to his advantage that Yogi Berra was such a small guy, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Yogi was a man.
It's not even close. The greatest quotes of all time, any sport.
Oh, hands down, absolutely.
Yep.
Hey, just for curiosity, and I don't want to steal Sean's thunder, but is my man Pat on his list, or is he on anybody's today?
Yes.
All right, good, because I want to make sure he gets brought up today.
Yeah, but Pat.
I feel like I steal that one every year, so I kind of wanted to pass that along to somebody else that maybe can do it justice.
Yeah, when you picked your three, I made sure that
Thank you.
Sean did Pat Tillman.
Thank you.
I never do it because we've done this so much. I always kind of feel like someone else should get to do it. You know what I mean? Plus, you know me, I love going these deep dives. One of my favorites of all time is coming up next hour too, Christy Mathewson. I mean, his story. If you haven't heard it, you need to stay tuned because it is a very sobering story. We'll just put it that way.
You're listening to Braves Country Baseball's Salute to Service Special, a compilation from our Armchair Quarterback radio show, which aired for 8 years on CBS Sports affiliates before changing to Braves Country. It's a compilation of shows that are going over some of our more famous athletes who served our country as well. And thank you for your service. Happy Memorial Day to everyone out there, and thank you for your service.
He's the armchair quarterback. He's full of beer and he's full of snacks. He's the all-American man with a cool one in his head.
Drop me some knowledge on Mr. Rocky Bleier.
All right, so Rocky Bleier, a wonderful American, born and raised in Appleton, Wisconsin, is actually the oldest of 4 children. Played college football at the University of Notre Dame, graduated in 1968 with a degree in business management, won the national title. While he was at Notre Dame in 1966, he was drafted in the 16th round. That'll harken back for you, it being that long. The 16th round of the 1968 NFL draft by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Played 1 year, his rookie year, before he was drafted into Vietnam. In Vietnam, he actually took shrapnel and a live fire round into his right leg. He lost part of his right foot in the blast as well. Doctors told him his football career was over. He always tells a story about getting a postcard from Steelers owner Art Rooney, which just said, "Rock, the team's not doing well. We need you, Art Rooney." And worked his way back onto the field after a couple years of working so hard, in pain, with physical therapy, that he had a really tough time, working properly on the football field. Became a great lead blocker over the way, was part of the team that won 4 Super Bowls with the Steelers, kind of infamously caught a touchdown pass from Terry Bradshaw in Super Bowl 13, that the Steelers never gave up that lead in that game. He retired with 3,865 rushing yards, and at the time of his retirement was the Steelers' 4th all-time leading rusher. So a great American, served our country well, and a true testament to perseverance, Mr. Rocky Bleier.
His story is always one of my favorites. Before we head to break, I'm going to tell you about Christy Mathewson, the Christian gentleman, arguably one of the greatest starting pitchers in the history of baseball. And with the use of poisonous gas, a major concern in World War I, Christy Mathewson, as a part of the U.S. Army's Chemical Corps, became a high-profile unit. It was the first division that Christy Mathewson served following his baseball career. In 1918, Mathewson enlisted and was sent to France. There he was accidentally gassed by mustard poison gas and developed tuberculosis. Christy Mathewson died in 1925 at a very, very young age, and that's Christy Mathewson. Still, for my money, arguably top 5 starting pitchers in the history of baseball. Those are always hard to gauge against each other because, first of all, Mathewson, the tail end of his career was actually hurt. When he came back, he could have played in Major League Baseball. He tried to make the attempt to come back. He also tried to work in the front office, but the mustard gas had did him in. But Christy Mathewson, he was right there with Walter Johnson as the 2 best starting pitchers at the beginning of baseball, at the turn of the 20th century. And when you look at some of their stats, I mean, they are just absolutely phenomenal. The one thing I like about Christy Mathewson more than just about anything else, the reason why they call him the Christian gentleman is because back when he was playing, people always know now that you get bubble gum with your cards, or I don't even think they even do that anymore. But when we were growing up, they would put bubble gum in cards. I think they quit doing that because you could no longer say they're in mint condition if it had the bubble gum residue on it, right? But for decades, that's what they did. They put bubble gum in the cards. Well, Christy Mathewson was the one that stood up and said, because when they first started doing this at the turn of the 19th or the 20th century, they were putting tobacco in those cards, chewing tobacco. And Christy Mathewson stood up and said, if you're going to do that, don't put my damn picture in there because I don't want kids thinking that I chew tobacco and it lead to them smoking tobacco, et cetera, because he lived a very pristine life. He wouldn't drink, nothing, whatever. And that's why they call him the Christian gentleman. When he did that, Honus Wagner followed suit and said, you know what, if Christy Mathewson isn't going to do it, I'm not going to do it either. Leave my name out of it. And that's why the Honus Wagner card from it's either 1907 or 1908 is so revered because it was the last one that they did with tobacco with Honus Wagner. After that, they made them switch to bubblegum. So it wasn't supposed to happen. They let it out. He raised Cain, and they took it off the shelves. So that's why that particular card, you'll see it go for like astronomical millions of dollars. Every few years, someone will end up selling it, right? And that's why it is such a rare card, is because of that. We got to take a quick break. Tell us about Pat Tillman before you have to jump off.
All right, and I would encourage anybody who's listening to actually study his story because he's one of the greatest Americans, certainly in the history of my lifetime, and of all time. Started his college career as a linebacker at Arizona State in '94. Was actually only 5'11". Ended up being moved to safety. He was Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year in 1997. He was also Arizona State's MVP. Graduated in 3.5 years with a 3.85 GPA. He was drafted in the 1998 draft, 226th overall by the Arizona Cardinals. Played safety, started 10 of 16 games in his rookie season. At one point in his career, turned down a 5-year, $9 million contract from the St. Louis Rams because he loved the Arizona people so much and they had been so good to him. Won 3 academic awards at Arizona State. Kind of famously enlisted for service in June of 2002 in the aftermath of the attacks on 9/11. And was killed in action in Iraq or Afghanistan not long after that, in 2004, posthumously was awarded the Silver Star and Purple Heart medals, gave up millions of dollars to serve his country, and just a wonderful American in any sense of the word. If anybody's listening out there, please don't spend too much time around the circumstances of his death, because that's not the lesson of his life. The lesson of his life is sacrifice and higher calling, and loved his country. A wonderful American, Pat Tillman.
Amen. I'm going to leave you with Warren Spahn. Before that, I don't want to gloss over the fact that we normally do Ted Williams and we normally do Bob Feller, but we've done them at so many times that we want to kind of give you some other names today. But you do want to look up the incredible career of Ted Williams. I mean, this guy was just unreal, and Bob Feller for that matter too. But we're going to finish off with Warren Spahn. After finishing the 1942 season in the minor leagues, Warren Spahn enlisted in the Army as a combat engineer, served in the Battle of the Bulge and in Ludendorff Bridge. He received a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. When he returned to baseball, Spahn was 25 years old, playing in the pros from 46 to 1965. He went on to win 20 games in 13 different seasons, including a 23-7 record when he was 42 years old. Spahn finished with 363 wins, the sixth winningest pitcher of all time. He trailed Cy Young by 148 wins. Spahn won the Cy Young Award and was the runner-up 3 times. He had 1 World Series title, 14-time All-Star, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1972.
Listening to Braves Country Baseball's Salute to Service Special, a compilation from our Armchair Quarterback radio show, which aired for 8 years on CBS Sports affiliates before changing to Braves Country. It's a compilation of shows that are going over some of our more famous athletes who served our country as well. And thank you for your service. You're listening to Braves Country Baseball's Salute to Service Special, a compilation from our Armchair Quarterback radio show, which aired for 8 years on CBS Sports affiliates before changing to Braves Country. It's a compilation of shows that are going over some of our more famous athletes who served our country as well. And thank you for your service.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
You're listening to Braves Country Baseball's Salute to Service Special, a compilation from our Armchair Quarterback radio show, which aired for 8 years on CBS Sports affiliates before changing to Braves Country. It's a compilation of shows that are going over some of our more famous athletes who served our country as well. And thank you for your service. Hope y'all enjoy from Armchair Quarterbacks Radio Days Gone By.
Armchair.
10 years ago, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit. These men promptly escaped from maximum security stockade. Today, still wanted by the government, they survive as soldiers of fortune. If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire
Braves Country.
'Cause he's the armchair quarterback. He's full of beer and he's full of snacks. The all-American man.
Yeah, man. I did a little research, and of course there were several of them that popped to mind automatically. Pat Tillman, no doubt, Army Ranger. Gave up a promising NFL career to serve his country. But that was to me, that was the first one that popped in my head, and so I wanted to do a little research, man, and I had a couple of them. Jackie Robinson, Bradley served in the United States Army. Yogi Berra served in the U.S. Navy.
Yogi Berra lived a life, didn't he?
He did. And then, and this one's for Teamus, man. Ted Williams.
Yeah.
He he didn't just serve in World War II. He also served in Korea. Gave up right around 5 years of his Major League Baseball career to serve his country.
The other thing about him is this, that I don't think a lot of people realize, is that, first of all, his records would have been probably darn near unbeatable if he would have played those 5 years, if there wasn't wartime, right? But then the other thing is, he grew up in military town. He grew up in San Diego, so that's why it meant a lot to him to go join the Navy, because obviously San Diego, outside of Jacksonville and maybe Annapolis, San Diego is the U.S. Navy. And the other thing about him that I think usually gets lost in the mix is that not only is he arguably the greatest hitter of all time, most people consider him the greatest pilot of all time. His eyesight and reflexes just must have been off the charts when you consider he's up there as one of the greatest Navy pilots ever and one of the greatest hitters ever. And to me, that's what resonates, is the guy just had an unbelievable talent. They should have been cloning him. I know they tried to, and they did that weird thing. They froze his head or whatever. I don't know what that was about, but if they could have cloned folks back then, I mean, that's the guy you clone. Whether you're a Red Sox fan or not, man, I don't see anyone that has ever said anything bad about Ted Williams. I just think one of the coolest things about him is that they asked him as a young child, what did he want to be when he grew up? And he said, I want to be the guy that walks down the street and people point at him and say, that's the best damn hitter that's ever walked the earth. And he did it. I mean, to be that laser focused on something that early in his career.
Yeah, laser focused, man. I mean, and everybody knows I'm no Red Sox fan, but I have a great deal of respect for his ability on the baseball field and for his service for our.
Well, it's not his fault that he got picked by the wrong team, right?
Yeah, it's totally not his fault, man.
It's not like the Red Sox are a college and he chose to go there.
Exactly.
I've got my Mount Rushmore that I'm going to get into next hour, but some of the people that I think a lot of people don't know a lot about, I'm going to gloss them over real quickly. We've got other things we're going to get into, and we're going to be doing this all day long. You remember Leon Spinks? That he's the only fighter ever to take the belt away from Ali. Okay? What a lot of people don't know about that guy is that he grew up in a rough area in St. Louis, Missouri. He joined the Marine Corps to get the heck out of there. When he got in the Marine Corps, they taught him how to box. I thought that was pretty. His service wasn't jaw dropping like Ted Williams, but I thought that was some of the cool stuff. And one of the guys that plays, probably forgotten, but he played during our generation, is Chad Hennings. He was a linebacker for the Air Force Academy, and he went and served. He served 4 years, so he was over there in the first Desert Storm, right? He just got out of harm's way, but he came back to play for, I believe he played for the Cowboys and a couple other teams, and ended up with a good 7-8 year career. He's one of the ones we've always kind of glossed over. And one of the other ones that I'll just throw at you and we'll move on is, he's not on my list, but he came really close to. It's a guy by the name of Hobie Baker. And he is the only athlete to be named in the College Football and Hockey Hall of Fame. He went to Princeton. He served in World War I. He was the commander of the 103rd Aero Squadron. And long story short, Baker was killed just a few weeks after the war while he was still in the military flying a test plane back. So I like to give respect to him. On Veterans Day, we do an entire show, and this year it'll obviously be a 3-hour show. We do an entire show of this. This is all we do. We do deep dives
today it's Memorial Day, so it's we've got a lot going on, so we'll move along a little bit, but we like to give the salutes to everybody. And as my wife's running around in the background, I'm hoping she didn't hear about our whole plan for me to get the pork butt going.
Yeah, sales at Ross. There's a sales at Ross.
There's a sales at Ross. Buy none, get one free. I'm telling you, it was a deal. They would only take cash, so I don't have a receipt.
Look at all the money I saved. All this stuff was 30-40% off.
First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. And it's high, high, hey, the army's on its way. Proud of the brave, solid and strong. For wherever we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along.
You're listening to Braves Country Baseball's Salute to Service Special, a compilation from our Armchair Quarterback radio show, which aired for 8 years on CBS Sports affiliates before changing to Braves Country. It's a compilation of shows that are going over some of our more famous athletes who served our country as well. And thank you for your service.
He's the armchair quarterback. He's full of beer and he's full of snacks. The all-American man with a cool one in his hand.
So who's number one on your list?
No disrespect to any of them that didn't make it. These are just four that, to me, brought me joy, and I enjoyed learning about them over the years as we've covered them. And my first one's Bob Feller. He's currently the oldest living Hall of Famer. He actually, in 1946, threw a 107-mile-an-hour fastball, second fastest pitch ever recorded. He was the first major leaguer to volunteer for active duty, enlisting in the Navy just 2 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Prior to his enlistment, he was arguably the best pitcher in the major league. He had already amassed 107 wins and led the American League in both wins and strikeouts the previous 3 seasons before the war. He returned to pitch in 1946 after missing 4 seasons, finished his comeback season with 348 strikeouts, a 2.18 ERA, and 36 complete games. I repeat, 36 complete games. That's Bob Feller.
It's pretty amazing. The first one I'm going to go to is Jackie Robinson. He was assigned to the Army unit, a segregated Army unit, after being drafted in 1942. Jackie Robinson subsequently was accepted in the officer candidate school and commissioned as a second lieutenant. He was later court-martialed in 1944 after being taken into custody by military police for refusing to move to the back of an army bus. So this is the precursor to the civil rights movement. He stood by his principles, and later on he would break the color barrier, as we all know. He was acquitted by an all-white panel of officers by the proceedings, kept him from being deployed with his tank battalion, but after being honorably discharged, Robinson signed with a Negro Baseball League team, and in 1947 became the first player to break baseball's America color line when he played with the Dodgers. He was also named the Rookie of the Year. That Rookie of the Year award is now called the Jackie Robinson Award. The second baseman went on to 6-time All-Star, 1949 NL MVP, and was a World Series champion of Robinson. And Robinson's famous 42 number is now retired throughout baseball. So that was my first one. Who else you got?
My next one's Rocky Bleier. Rocky's a 4-time Super Bowl champion with the Pittsburgh Steelers. After finishing his rookie season with the Steelers in '68, Bleier was drafted into the Army and volunteered for active duty in Vietnam. In '69, while on patrol, his platoon was ambushed, and he was hit in the leg with with a bullet, and a local or nearby grenade exploded and shot shrapnel into his leg. He later earned the Purple Heart and Bronze Star for his bravery. While he was recovering in an Army hospital, doctors told him he would never play football again. He reported back to the Steelers training camp the year later after being wounded in Vietnam. He couldn't walk without being in constant pain and spent the next 2 years trying to earn an active duty spot on the roster. The Steelers even waived him twice. His tenacity and off-season workouts helped him overcome his war wounds, and he earned an active spot on the roster in '74. In 1976, him and teammate Franco Harris rushed for 1,000 yards each and became the second tandem in history at that time to ever rush for 1,000 yards out of the backfield. Mercury Morris and Larry Zonker were the other two.
You know, with him, I grew up knowing about Rocky Bleier as a great running back. I don't ever remember anyone ever mentioning, until we started doing this, I don't ever remember them mentioning his service. And I can always see why he's high up on your list. It's just amazing. And maybe I was just oblivious because I was younger, or maybe it just wasn't well documented. I don't know. But until we started doing this, I didn't know this about a lot of the athletes. It's one of my favorite shows we do of the year because obviously the the Veterans Day show is the big one where we do this deep dive for the entire show. But it's one of my favorite things because I think it gives listeners a better appreciation for what these men do. And some of this stuff will get us choked up. Like I've had to fight back tears several times, even though I've read the thing 2 or 3 times before I go on air, right? I'll still get choked up when you read some of this stuff. My number 2 is Christy Mathewson. Christy Mathewson, with the use of poisonous gas, a major concern for soldiers in World War I, the U.S. Army's Chemical Corps became a high-profile unit, which is where Christy Mathewson served. It was in this division that Mathewson served after his baseball career. In 1918, Mathewson enlisted and was sent to France, where he was accidentally gassed and developed tuberculosis. He died in 1925. Now, he had every intention of coming back and playing much longer. But when he came back, his evidently he had a hard time breathing, et cetera, et cetera. You can imagine what tuberculosis did. And back then, they didn't have all the regulations that they have in wartime like they do now. They had developed poisonous gas, and they were using on it. I mean, it was a terrible thing that the Germans were doing back then. But Christy Mathewson, no pun intended, took one for the U.S. team and got in there, but essentially gave his life. And I've always respected that because a lot of people also don't understand. Christy Mathewson is one of the greatest pitchers to ever play the game. Christy Mathewson finished with 373 wins, a 2.13 ERA, 2,500 strikeouts, back in a time where strikeouts did not happen. By the time, the Nolan Ryans and the Roger Clemens came around and they're hitting all these strikeout marks, and you're like, man, they strike them out a lot better than they used to. It's not that they were throwing faster. The key to the game back then was not to get struck out. Everyone went out of their way to make contact with the baseball. You were embarrassed. I even remember when I was growing up, it used to be a thing, and now it's no longer, no one cares anymore. But you used to be embarrassed to have to walk back to the dugout after a strikeout. So he played for the New York Giants from 1900 to 1916, and then he played with the famed Cincinnati Red Stockings from 16 to 18. He was on that Cincinnati team that that beat the Chi Sox. He's 2-time World Series champion, 2-time Triple Crown winner, NL wins leader 4 times, 5-time NL ERA leader, and 5-time strikeout leader. He pitched 2 no-hitters. 373 wins, he probably would have had up around 425-ish if he hadn't have gotten poisoned.
What's your number 3?
My number 3 is just one of my favorite veterans to ever play the game, and that's Ted Williams. Teddy Ballgame, whatever you want to refer to him as, arguably the greatest hitter in Major League Baseball history. He hit 406 in 1941, the last time anybody's ever hit over 400. Williams, a veteran of 2 branches of the military, the Navy and Marine Corps, and a veteran of 2 wars, World War II and the Korean War. World War II, he served as a Navy flight instructor and never saw active duty. During the Korean War, Williams threw 39 successful combat missions for the Marine Corps. On one such mission, his plane suffered anti-aircraft fire that crippled his electrical systems and hydraulics, but he managed to fly the damaged plane back to an air base close to the front lines. For this, he was awarded the Air Medal. He lost a total of 5 seasons to military service for his country. And then the rest of the world, we just speculate what could have been had he not. But I'm so thankful that Ted did serve, and for that, I salute him.
Yeah, I think it's been well documented what Ted has done. I just don't think a lot of people have grasped what his numbers could have been, because that was right in the prime of his career both times. And
absolutely,
to think that, I mean, first of all, he would have been at least number 2 all time in home runs when he retired. Obviously, Hank Aaron passed later on down the road, but he most definitely would have beaten Willie Mays' numbers, and he might have beaten Babe Ruth. In fact, I was reading up on this yesterday, and he said that one of the things that touched him the most was that Babe Ruth made a comment to him very early in his career. Very early, Babe Ruth said to him, "You're one of the best I've ever seen. If anyone breaks my record, I hope it's you." And he said that he wore that as a badge of honor his entire career. That with Babe Ruth thought that I was one of the greatest ever. That had to have meant something, right?
Just, man, a quote like that, just letting it all sink in.
Yeah, ghosts talking to ghosts, and here you think about it. It was 100 years ago this coming fall that Babe Ruth was traded to the New York Yankees for no net. It's all about that Broadway show up there in Boston. I love poking Red Sox fans about that. My next one is Jack Loomis. After playing in 9 games for the New York Giants as a rookie defensive end, Jack Loomis enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1942, the first wave of troops to land on Iwo Jima in 1945 was his platoon. He remained on the island after the initial day to continue to battle the Japanese. Commanding Company E's 3rd Rifle Platoon march. On March 8th, Loomis was helped knock off 3 enemy strongholds despite suffering injuries from grenade shrapnel before being mortally wounded by a landmine while saving 2 others. Before dying, he famously told the field doctor, "Well, Doc, the New York Giants lost a hell of an end today." Loomis was awarded the Medal of Honor. What's your number 4?
Well, my number 4 is I'm going to come full circle with Memorial Day and talk about the baddest dude on the planet, Mr. Pat Tillman. He was an enigma, and especially in today's age of prima donnas and athletes that are chasing dollars and fame, Pat turned that down. He actually did the unimaginable. After the September 11th terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers, Tillman turned down a multi-million-dollar contract with the Cardinals to enlist in the Army. Him and his brother, who was an aspiring baseball player, both became Army Rangers and went down to Fort Benning, Georgia. They did multiple tours of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. Tragically, Tillman was killed over in Afghanistan and paid the ultimate price, and that is what we need to keep in mind this Memorial Day, is these guys and their sacrifices and what they've done for our country. And Pat Tillman, I thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I think he's probably one of the most talked about ones. When we do Veterans Day, we have people send theirs in as well. And Pat Tillman's usually the number 1 for obvious reasons. It's this generation.
It is, and that's
you
the
know.
reason my list is the way it was. I didn't want to memorialize anyone but for Tillman. Man, just the unselfishness in an individual for anybody that signs up for that kind of duty, but to be in the walk of life that he was in and the situations and the income, and to just put it all aside and do what he felt was necessary.
Well, if you think about it, he did what Ted Williams did. And a lot of them did in World War II. World War II was commonplace. When Tillman did it, everyone was like, what are you, nuts? Because this has become a me, me, me society. Pat Tillman put his country first.
Amen.
If Pat Tillman would have done that in the 1940s, nothing would have been thought of it because several guys did it, right?
Yeah, it's true. It wouldn't have even been talked about as much. I mean, obviously, just like Loomis, it would have been brought up and we would still talk about it, but it wouldn't have been as big a deal.
Bob Kalsu is my last one. He's the only professional football player to lose his life in the Vietnam War. Kalsu was killed on July 21st, 1970, after his unit came under enemy mortar fire just hours after his wife gave birth to their second child. That part always gets to me. She was informed of her husband's death. In addition to being an All-American tackle at the University of Oklahoma, Kalsu was also in Oklahoma's ROTC. To satisfy the program's responsibility, Kalsu